Chapter 156. After returning to Ximen Square, Jinwan successfully received the approval document from the National Land Office. Boss, since the surrounding land and housing prices are rising, should we sell off the properties nearby as well? Xiaoba asked. Jinwan sat quietly in the car, looking at the rain outside the window. She calmly replied, "Not selling."
Why?
It's not easy to wait for an opportunity to raise the price. If we don't sell now, we'll suffer losses like before. Jinwan chuckled and glanced at Xiaoba. You see, I've recently used the MO Corporation's funds to purchase a few pieces of land that are extremely expensive. I'm so worried that I can't even sleep, am I right? Xiaoba grinned, nodding her head. However, she still said, "But I believe in boss's intuition. Since you dare to do it, you definitely have your reasons. At least you know how to talk." Jinwan chuckled. She knew that she would definitely earn money, but she could not be too reckless. If she relied on her ability to predict the future and seized all the opportunities, she would only become the target of everyone else. In this ruthless business world, how many people became rich overnight, and how many people were immediately targeted by others? With every step, they would be hindered by their peers, as though they were walking on the edge of a knife. What Jinwan needed to do was to carry her ambition in this prosperous era and walk steadily step by step. Every share of the soup must be kept safely in her own pocket and would not be eaten away by any enemies. What she needed to do was to gradually develop the studio into a property brand company that belonged to her. Bit by bit, she would turn the funds in her hands into several times the profits. She needed to have the ability to support herself and the Ji family. She needed to do better and no longer need to be shielded by Mo Jingshan. What she needed to do was to be able to shield Mo Jingshan from the wind and rain one day. All of a sudden, Xiaoba pointed at the laptop on her lap, shouting, "Boss, look at the company's email. YJ Group said they want to buy the land beside Ximen Square. They offered 200 million yuan. They even sent such an official company email. That's 200 million yuan. Isn't this the same price that CEO Han bought it for? They actually didn't make a loss." Boss, how did you guess it? You're too amazing. When I received the documents earlier, I was worried that no one would accept your offer, but there really is someone who wants it. Jinwan raised her brows, speaking calmly. Use the company's name to reply with an official email. Be polite and don't offend them. Tell them that we don't accept the price of 200 million yuan. If they're sincere, they can come to the studio to discuss with me. Why not? Previously, no one would buy that piece of land for less than 200 million. Now, we can finally recoup our losses. Boss, aren't you planning to sell it? Just do as I say. Jinwan calmly glanced at her. Xiaoba saw Jinwan's calm and composed expression. Although she didn't quite understand, her heart ached as if it was cutting her flesh. She was afraid that she would lose this rare opportunity to recoup her losses, but after all, Jinwan was the boss, so she had to do as she was told. Glancing at Xiaoba's sulky expression, Jinwan just smiled and didn't say anything more. In Jinwan's impression, 10 years later, the largest building complex in Haicheng's Ximen Square would be located on the land in her hands. The developer would be the country's famous real estate company, BGY Group. If history was not wrong, with BGY's accurate foresight, he would definitely not miss out on this prime location and would definitely appear. The price would not be as simple as 200 million. After getting the approval documents, Jinwan naturally attended a dinner party jointly held by the City Hall and the business community. Today, Jinwan wore an off-shoulder, nude evening gown. Her face was lightly made up. She was already attractive, and right now, she was even more beautiful. Her lips were red, and her skin was fair. Beneath the gown was a pair of long, slender legs. She wore high heels, and her usual casual demeanor was gone. She exuded the charm of a little woman. For many years, she had always been so beautiful that people could not take their eyes off her. Tonight, she appeared here as the person in charge of the studio and caused quite a stir. Firstly, it seemed that the eldest Miss Ji hadn't attended such a formal occasion for a long time. Secondly, After marrying into the Mo family, she had been keeping a low profile and rarely showed up. Last time, at the Mo Corporation and Shine's dinner party, she was carried away by Mo Jingshan. Although many of the people present hadn't seen the scene that night, they had heard of Mrs. Mo. Right now, Mrs. Mo seemed to be very stable. Many people did not expect that Jinwan would actually be able to stand firmly by Mo Jingshan's side. She was not even chased out by the Mo family. Most of Hai Cheng's wealthy young ladies hoped that Jinwan would not be able to live well. However, things did not go as they wished. Jinwan was as beautiful as ever. In fact, compared to the arrogant and bright her of the past, she appeared more composed and reserved. Her exquisite makeup hid her beautiful and aggressive appearance, and her low-key evening dress made her appear even more indifferent. She was beautiful, but she was no longer arrogant. Instead, she appeared cold and elegant. Apart from this, the female bodyguard by her side was also particularly eye-catching. "Mrs. Mo, I'll wait for you over there. If anything happens, I'll come over immediately." Fengling knew that it was not convenient for her to follow by Jinwan's side. After sending Jinwan over, she took her leave. Jinwan had Fengling head to the resting area to eat something while she walked in alone. She ignored the gazes of the people around her and maintained a dignified and polite smile. However, she did not expect to meet Xing Yihan in such a place. From afar, she saw the tall figure dressed in a suit. Jinwan felt a lump in her throat. "What are you hiding from?" She walked away from the crowd and was about to go to the leaders of the National Land Office when she was interrupted by Xing Yihan, who had approached her without her noticing. Jinwan ignored him and did not respond. In the blink of an eye, she began to chat with several celebrities who used to be friends with the Ji family, trying to ignore Xing Yihan's figure and the gaze he was casting at her. Seeing that she was deliberately avoiding him, Xing Yihan smiled and was not in a hurry to go over. He waited until the celebrities left after exchanging greetings with her. Then he looked at the little woman who turned around in the crowd and couldn't find other acquaintances. She couldn't help but look back at him. He looked at her snow-white neck and wrists. Unlike other socialites who wore all kinds of luxurious accessories, she was so clean that there was not even a simple thin chain or diamond watch. However, she was beautiful in her own way. Jinwan remembered that at the Shine Group's dinner party, she had sat in his car because she was drunk. At that time, she was so angry that she was muddle-headed. Now, she tried to avoid him as much as possible and did not want to have any contact with him. She turned to quickly walk out of the crowd. However, because she turned too quickly, she accidentally bumped into a beautiful woman holding a glass of red wine. Chapter 157. Jinwan usually did not pay much attention to the people at such banquets. However, when she saw the beautiful lady's face, her movements faltered. Her slightly apologetic expression immediately faded. This beautiful lady had once formed a grudge with her. She was the pearl of a furniture company, and her surname seemed to be Han. This Miss Han was once one of Mo Jingshan's pursuers. It could not be said that Mo Jingshan was not someone these people could easily meet. Especially after his marriage, these socialites who once had a crush on him and even threatened to jump off a building just to meet him could not even catch a glimpse of his back. This Miss Han, who had once appeared on Hai Cheng's news for almost jumping off a building for Mo Jingshan, was unconvinced by Jinwan's title as the #1 socialite due to her beautiful appearance. She had tried to compete with Jinwan several times at banquets, but was always coldly ignored by Jinwan. As time passed, they began to dislike each other and formed a grudge. What angered her even more was that after Jinwan married Mo Jingshan, she not only lost completely, but was also angered to the point of vomiting blood. Being able to meet Jinwan again at such an occasion, Miss Han naturally would not miss out on the opportunity to nitpick. Although Jinwan did not have much feelings for this Miss Han, when she saw the red wine stains on her gown, she lightly mocked, "You're still holding the wine glass firmly in your hand, but the wine in the glass has spilled all over you. Do you need me to tell you how exactly you spilled it? Are you sure you want to use such a despicable method to frame me at a banquet between the political and business worlds?" Miss Han's expression was unquenchable. "What do you mean?" You're still polite after knocking into me? This gown of mine was just ordered from overseas. Let's not talk about how expensive it was, but you ruined it the moment I put it on. Jean Wan was expressionless, but she did not wish to waste her energy arguing with someone like this. She calmly glanced at her and impatiently asked, "So, what do you want?" Miss Han looked at Jean Wan arrogantly and then glanced at the gown Jean Wan was wearing. She recognized that this gown was made by a famous designer in Paris and immediately said, "Take off your gown. Wear it for me." Jean Wan slightly raised her brows. "Are you sure?" Originally, the commotion here was not loud, but because Miss Han had intentionally raised her voice, all sorts of unfriendly gazes were directed toward Jean Wan. There were many people who were on the same side as Miss Han. In Haicheng, there were many who were unconvinced by Jean Wan and could not bear to see Jean Wan marrying into the Mo family. Various wealthy young ladies saw this scene and approached to watch. Their gazes were all directed in Jean Wan's direction. They stood by the side and pointed, whispering, and their gazes were unkind. "What's going on?" Miss Lin, who had a good relationship with Miss Han, walked over and asked deliberately. Miss Han said unhappily, "A certain Haicheng's #1 socialite is now crowned with the Mo family's name. She walks around with her eyes on the top of her head and doesn't even look at others. She bumped into me and caused my red wine to spill all over my body. In the end, not only did she refuse to apologize, she even became arrogant in front of me. Tell me, how can there be such logic in this world? She dirted my gown, and I have to bow and scrape to her on account of her status as Mrs. Mo?" By the side, Miss Lin and the other wealthy young ladies all shifted their gazes toward Jean Wan. Facing a common love rival, they naturally stood on the same side. To be able to see Jean Wan make a fool of herself in front of everyone was naturally a joyous thing. Miss Lin spoke with a conciliatory tone. "Since that's the case, then Mrs. Mo should apologize to Miss Han. After all, you've dirted her gown. Although your status is high, and the clothes you wear are many times better than ours, you can't look down on others like this. Is someone else's gown not a gown? If it's dirted, you have to apologize." A smile appeared on Jean Wan's face. "Me, apologize?" Miss Han and Miss Lin stood before Jean Wan, but for some reason, they felt that their aura could not compare to Jean Wan's. They felt as though they were shorter in front of her. However, there were still many people watching by the side, and there were many who were unhappy with Jean Wan. Miss Han met Jean Wan's eyes and said, "Earlier on, didn't you ask me how I want to resolve this matter? I've already said, take off your own clothes. I'll let this matter go like this." Jean Wan tilted her head slightly, looking at her with a smile that was not a smile. "Miss Han, you really don't care about trifles. Do you really like wearing clothes that others have worn? You don't have misophobia, but I have a very severe misophobia. I'd rather throw this gown into a shredder than allow others to touch my things." As she spoke, she paused for several seconds. "Also, Miss Han, you only have 2 mouthfuls of red wine left in your hand. You're holding the glass so firmly. I only turned around and bumped into you. It doesn't even count as bumping into you. Such a small amount of wine actually spilled onto you, and you cleverly stained it in the most obvious spot. I can't even be sure if I actually touched the hand you used to hold the wine. Do you really have to make a big deal out of it? Could it be that you've contracted Parkinson's at such a young age? Your hands trembled to the point where someone only touched you slightly, and the wine in this glass spilled onto you? You..." Miss Han instantly stared at Jean Wan in disbelief. She was so angry that her face was pale. She was clearly telling others that she was framing her and intentionally stirring up trouble. Right now, the one whose gown was dirted is me. Miss Han gritted her teeth in anger. "Mrs. Mo, your face is really too ugly when you're trying to push the blame away." "Am I pushing the blame away? If you can prove that this wine was indeed spilled by me, I'll immediately compensate you with a gown of the same style. But if you want me to take it off and give it to you, I'm afraid you're not qualified. Besides," Jean Wan's gaze calmly swept across her body. You're shorter than me by 5 centimeters, but you're clearly several kilograms heavier than me. Are you sure that even if I take it off, you'll be able to wear it? Jin Wan's speech was not fast, but there was no way for others to interrupt. The one who could not interrupt the most was naturally Miss Han. She was so angry that her hands were trembling. Chapter 158. For so many years, the reason why Jin Wan was not liked by these women in the socialite circle was because of her unyielding face and her mouth. Jin Wan was never at a disadvantage. Regardless of whether it was in the past or now, even after 10 more years of life experience, under her calm and reserved appearance, her personality of not allowing others to step on her head was still there. Whoever wanted to take advantage of her would most likely have to go back to the furnace and be remolded for several years. But from the looks of it, it really seemed as though she, Mrs. Mo, was bullying some of the Han family's young ladies. After all, her title of Mrs. Mo was enough to suppress others. Furthermore, this title caused all these wealthy young ladies to grit their teeth in hatred. Miss Lin saw that Miss Han was angered to the point of speechlessness and directly took a step forward. Mrs. Mo's aura is really great. As expected, you're different after marrying Mo Jingshan. I heard that the last time you appeared in such an occasion, you pretended to be weak and was carried by CEO Mo. We were still wondering how you managed such a marriage. So, it turns out that you're just pretending to be a little white flower in front of CEO Mo. Now that CEO Mo isn't here, you're starting to put on an oppressive aura again, aren't you? As expected, you're a scheming woman. Do you dare to say that you didn't purposely dirty her clothes? Do you dare to say that you're not targeting her? Jin Wan coldly glanced at her. Why would I target her? Isn't it because you know that Miss Han has always liked CEO Mo? And because she once had a little relationship with CEO Mo, you're jealous and hate her in your heart. Today, seeing her here, you want to dirty her clothes and embarrass her? Besides, who here doesn't know what kind of conduct you had in the past? You're an arrogant young lady who has bullied others many times. Why are you pretending to be innocent and virtuous now? Jin Wan's expression immediately darkened. Aside from being too lazy to pay attention to idlers like you, when have I ever bullied anyone? Pride doesn't seem to need you to judge. For example, this Miss Han in front of me. She asked me to take off my gown for her to wear, but I refused. She lifted a rock to smash her own feet and lost face, and now it's me who's bullying her? You're targeting me from the start. Otherwise, you wouldn't have bumped into me. Miss Han took the opportunity to speak. Jin Wan narrowed her eyes. Once, in order to pursue my husband, you even resorted to jumping off a building and acting crazily. In the end, he didn't even give you a single glance. How are you worthy of my attention? How is he worthy of me targeting him? The past was suddenly brought up again. Miss Han's expression instantly turned green. Her heart was pierced by Jin Wan's words of my husband. You have to know your place. If you can't take back the dirty water you've spilled, kneel on the ground and lick it clean. Don't expect others to wipe it for you. Jin Wan coldly said, and turned to leave.
Jin Wan.
Don't put on such an arrogant face. You were able to marry into the Mo family because you looked like a vixen. Let's see how many more years you can use this foxy trick. Right now, Mo Jingshan wants you. Who knows what will happen after a few years? If he gets sick of you and kicks you out of the Mo family, you, a second-hand good, can only be surrounded by a group of old men to sleep with you. You only have a face. What capital do you have to be proud of? What are you pretending for? Suddenly, Miss Han seemed to have been thoroughly angered and scolded. Jin Wan paused and turned to look at her mildly. Just a face for nothing? You don't even have a face, and you dare to stand here and talk about capital with me? Miss Han's tone faltered. She did not expect herself to be dragged into this. She gritted her teeth in anger. Miss Han's father was also present. When he heard the commotion, he immediately came over. When he saw that it was Jin Wan, although Jin Wan had the Mo family as her backing, he could not help but furrow his brows when he saw that his daughter was angered to such an extent and that her skirt was dirted. He used the attitude of an elder to instigate. Mrs. Mo, it's best to be more down to earth. If you do something wrong, you should admit it. Although my daughter shouldn't have openly quarreled with you here and hurt your face, since you dirted her clothes, you should at least show the proper attitude. Can't you understand human language? Ji-won no longer had any patience. She was even more unwilling to fight a battle of attrition with these people and felt that it was a waste of time. Her skirt was dirted by herself. It has nothing to do with me. If you don't believe me, you can check the surveillance footage yourself. Stand up and speak after you're done. Miss Han's father's expression immediately turned ugly. Mrs. Mo's upbringing is really too poor. Speaking to your elders like this, is this how your father taught you? It seems like I should find some time to have a chat with Director Ji and Elder Mo. If it were not for the fact that he could not embarrass Ji-won in front of so many people, Miss Han's father really wanted to give Ji-won a slap to let her know what was good for her. Miss Han relied on the fact that everyone was backing her up and that her father was by her side. She immediately looked at Ji-won arrogantly and domineeringly. The truth is right in front of us. After all, you did touch me, and the force with which you touched me can't be seen from the surveillance footage. Right now, we can turn this into a small matter. I still have that request. Take off your clothes. So, what if I can't wear it? I didn't say I wanted to wear it. Take off your clothes in front of everyone, and I won't bicker with you. At this moment, a lazy and smiling voice came from behind Ji-won. Miss Han, are you sure you want Mrs. Mo to take off her clothes in front of everyone? There are at least dozens of people here, if not hundreds. With so many people here, I'm afraid it won't be enough for Mo Jingshin to dig them out. This voice belonged to Sheng Ihan. Although he was clearly speaking for Ji-won, his words still caused Ji-won to feel extremely unhappy. His words were obviously filled with sarcasm and mockery that only she could hear. Mr. Sheng, I heard that you once had some relations with the Ji family. Aren't you afraid of causing a misunderstanding by standing up for Mrs. Mo at this time? Miss Han could no longer suppress her anger. She completely did not give Sheng Ihan any face. Even though he was already the successor of the Sheng family and his status could not be underestimated, she refused to let things go just like that. Besides, Mrs. Mo can't possibly not have a spare set of clothes. It's just taking off her gown. It can't be that she doesn't even have underwear underneath. She's Hai Cheng's #1 socialite. If she doesn't reveal her figure for everyone to see, who can say that she's worthy of these words? Miss Han glared at Ji-won. Miss Han, the Sheng family's department store is nearby. If you want, you can choose a few items at any time. They'll all be under this Sheng's name. Sheng Ihan continued to smile lightly. There's no need to make things so difficult for her. Miss Han did not give up. Mr. Sheng, are you trying to be a flower protector? What if I insist that Ji-won take off her clothes today? This Sheng has said everything. The Sheng family's department store's doors are always open for Miss Han, but you clearly do not plan on giving me this face. Sheng Ihan smiled faintly. Miss Han had already lost her rationality from anger. She coldly snorted. If Mr. Sheng's face is useless, then what about mine? Chapter 159. Ji-won was also startled. Tonight, Mo Jingshin had other matters to attend to in the company and could not leave. He gave her a chance to be independent, so she did not ask to come. She did not expect him to actually appear. She clearly did not suffer any grievances, and it was just a small argument. However, in this situation, and with Sheng Ihan present, she subconsciously felt her scalp tighten. Hearing Mo Jingshin's voice, Miss Han's expression changed greatly. She turned back in disbelief, and the moment she saw Mo Jingshin, she felt her legs weaken. Mo, CEO Mo. Everyone looked in that direction. The man was dressed in a black suit, revealing a white shirt. His black trousers were straight and meticulous, and his handmade Italian leather shoes were unhurried as he walked out from the crowd. The moment the tall, handsome man appeared in the hall, he carried a cold aura, causing the people around him to hold their breaths and take a step back. No one dared to stand out and say a word. The man's cold and indifferent brows under his short hair were covered with a thin layer of frost. His perfect, heart-stopping silhouette revealed a cold indifference that no one dared to approach. The moment Jin Wan met Mo Jingshan's gaze, she slowly pursed her lips. These people never had a moment of peace. They insisted on making a low-key person like him unhappy on such an occasion. If they provoked Mo Jingshan, they would be the ones to suffer in the end. Even she didn't want to see the scene of these people being abused later. What's more, she felt that if her husband's cold aura was seen by these women who had ill intentions toward him, they would have all sorts of thoughts in their hearts. She really wanted to hide this man away. Miss Han looked at the approaching man. She knew better than anyone that Mo Jingshan's gaze had never landed on anyone else for even a second. From beginning to end, the person he was looking at was Jin Wan. Xiao had thought about this man for so long, but she had never received the slightest bit of his favor. Not even a moment of eye contact had passed. Everyone looked at Mo Jingshan. From the moment he appeared, no one dared to speak. Not to mention the business world or the political world, many people in Haicheng had to rely on the Mo family. Therefore, even if these people did not give face to the Sheng family, they would not dare to offend Mo Jingshan in the slightest. Otherwise, they would not have a good ending. It was just that she didn't expect that Sheng Yihan would protect Jin Wan even though she was the target of public criticism. It was said that Sheng Yihan had a deep relationship with the Ji family, and it was clear that they were enemies. But more importantly, Mo Jingshan would come. Mo Jingshan actually appeared. This was an absolutely unexpected result. If they had known that he would come, who would have dared to take the opportunity to spew dirty water on Mrs. Mo? Now, the people around them all wanted to retreat 800 meters away to avoid being implicated. Mo Jingshan walked up to Jin Wan and stopped. He touched her hair, which was a rare sight. He lowered his eyes to look at the evening gown she was wearing, his voice low and heavy. Very beautiful. Jin Wan. The surrounding people were completely taken aback. Although they had heard that Mo Jingshan seemed to care a lot about Jin Wan, they never expected that in such an occasion and under such an atmosphere, the first thing he would do after appearing would be to praise his wife's beauty. He really did not place anyone in his eyes at all. Miss Han felt even more embarrassed by the side. Back then, in order to speak to Mo Jingshan, she even wanted to jump off a building, but this man was so cold that he did not even look at her. He did not even send a secretary to comfort her. Even when the news of her wanting to jump off a building was published on social news and the reporters went to interview him, he still did not respond. It was as though any woman who pursued him and liked him did not exist in his eyes, and he did not need to waste a single second on them. But towards this Jin Wan, although Jin Wan didn't suffer any loss just now, she was still a little nervous in front of so many people. Now that Mo Jingshan was by her side, she seemed to be relaxed. Standing by his side, she didn't speak but just smiled. No matter where you go, there are people who want to bully you. Is it because you're too weak, or does everyone think that Mrs. Mo can be ridden on by anyone? Mo Jingshan's gaze was cold, and his tone was cold. However, it revealed a sense of protection that belonged solely to Jin Wan. The surrounding people did not dare to breathe loudly because of his words. Jin Wan smiled. She was about to say that she was not bullied when the man reached out and pulled her into his embrace. He held her waist, allowing her to lean into his embrace. He then touched her shoulder and lowered his eyes to look at her. Not cold? Jin Wan shook her head. There's air conditioning in the banquet hall. It's not cold. By the side, Miss Lin and Miss Han watched with reddened eyes. Earlier, this Jin Wan was arrogant, as though she was not afraid of anyone. However, with Mo Jingshan's arrival, in the blink of an eye, she seemed to have softened into a harmless little rabbit. She was completely protected in the man's embrace. Her earlier domineering appearance was nowhere to be seen. Mo. Don't be fooled by her. Earlier, she was very arrogant. Did she always pretend to be so weak and pitiful when she was with you? She was clearly the one who bumped into me here. She refused to apologize and even, Miss Han's eyes were red from anger as she spoke. Mo Jingshan patted Jin Wan's head and turned to look at Miss Han. He said with a smile that did not seem like a smile, "Earlier on, were you the one who asked her to take off her clothes in public?" Miss Han originally wanted to use this opportunity to smear Jin-won's name. However, the moment she met Mo Jingshan's gaze, her heart was instantly filled with fear. She resisted the fear and straightened her neck to say, "My gown was dirted by her. Initially, I only wanted to exchange gowns with her. She was the one who refused and even turned around to bite me. She even brought up the past between you and me to mock me." Miss Han softened her voice as she spoke. She was slightly embarrassed. However, Mo Jingshan's gaze was cold as he watched her.
"Me and you?
"What happened between us? Do we know each other?" Miss Han's complexion instantly paled. The surrounding young ladies all looked at her with pity and disdain. Not only did Miss Han's expression turn ugly, but everyone present also stared in disbelief at Mo Jingshan, who was protecting Jin-won in his embrace. Mo Jingshan's words clearly sounded calm and unemotional, but it was as though a sharp knife had silently drilled out, stabbing Miss Han until she was covered in blood. Miss Han bit her lips hard. She did not expect that back then, when she was willing to risk her life for him and jumped off a building, shocking the entire city. Mo Jingshan, as the person involved, did not even remember her name. CEO Mo, Miss Han felt wronged. She still wanted to fight for herself. Chapter 160. Mo Jingshan's tone was very calm, but it was cold and dangerous. Jin-won suddenly felt a bone-piercing coldness and viciousness from this man who had always treated her gently and patiently. "Actually, it's not a big deal. They can't pressure me," Jin-won whispered in his arms. However, Mo Jingshan only caressed her hair, speaking warmly, "Be good. Some people must be taught a lesson. Your temper is good, but it doesn't mean I'll tolerate it." The expression on Miss Han's face was about to shatter, and the people around her were sighing in their hearts. Jin-won had a good temper? When had Jin-won's temper ever been good? Was it because Jin-won's acting skills were too good, or was it because beauty was in the eye of the beholder? Jin-won was also speechless for a moment. She gently pinched his sleeves and softly said, "Tonight's banquet, my goal is to leave a good impression in the eyes of the City Hall's Homeland Security Department. You just have to help me regain my face. Don't let this kind of thing bother you." Mo Jingshan placed another comforting kiss on her hair. "All right, I know." His attitude couldn't be considered very gentle, but it made the eyes of all the rich young ladies, including Miss Han, almost turn red. The man who was usually so cold and indifferent actually gave all his love to Jin-won alone.
"Why?"
"CEO Mo, I think today's matter, we should just muddle through." Miss Han's father braced himself and said, "This matter, my daughter is indeed in the wrong." Her beloved gown was dirted, so she couldn't control her emotions and offended Mrs. Mo. "This is really..." Miss Han's father still wanted to speak, but was stopped by Mo Jingshan's gaze. "The thing I hate the most is seeing my woman being bullied in public. Everyone here, who else wishes to see her undress?" Miss Han and Miss Lin couldn't help but shiver. Shung Yihan didn't feel anything because of the scene just now. Seeing Jin-won in Mo Jingshan's arms, he glanced at Mo Jingshan and smiled with interest. Seeing that Miss Han was frightened to the point of trembling, Mo Jingshan's dark eyes swept past her. "Since you're the first to find trouble, don't you want someone to test your figure in front of everyone? Then you start. You take it off first." Miss Han's expression was stiff. Her fingers gripped the hem of her dress tightly. As she faced Mo Jingshan, she felt her heart tremble. At the same time, she blushed because Mo Jingshan had forced her to take off her clothes. Seeing that Miss Han was still blushing at such a time, Jin-won felt upset. She raised her eyes to glance at Mo Jingshan. The man lowered his head to look at the woman in his arms who appeared to be jealous. He then glanced at the time and knew that she did not have the patience to continue dealing with these people. He then turned to look at them. Those who were making a ruckus just now, who wants to see them take off their clothes? This Mo doesn't mind asking this hotel to open up a hall for you to watch. There were many people present, but the room was silent. No one dared to make a sound. Everyone could tell that Mo Jingshan's so-called opening up the hall was actually to send these troublemakers to a certain place. In any case, it would not be a good place, and they would definitely not have a good ending. You don't want to take it off. Mo Jingshan coldly glanced at Miss Han, suddenly smiling coldly. Then why don't we follow Mr. Sheng's earlier suggestion and dig out a pair of eyes to take a look? Miss Han's face instantly turned pale. Her eyes were filled with fear. Mo Jingshan's gaze coldly swept across the crowd. At this moment, the bodyguards rushed in. Even Feng Ling, who previously did not move because she thought Jin Wan could handle everything, also walked in. Mo Jingshan's tone was low and slow, but it carried a bone-chilling coldness. Take them away. Take off your clothes and throw them in front of the hotel as a public display.
No.
Miss Han instantly screamed. I don't want to take off my clothes. I don't want to. In the end, the bodyguards had already stepped forward to hold her down. Miss Han screamed and struggled madly. I don't want. CEO Mo, you can't do this to me. My clothes were dirted by Jin Wan. I was only joking with her. I didn't really want to do anything to her. Mo Jingshan's thin lips curved up without any warmth. He glanced at her as though she was the real joke. So, are you going to take it off yourself, or do you want my people to help you? I'll take it off. I'll take it off. Miss Han struggled to free her hands. She cried as she raised her hands and tugged the shoulders of her gown down. Although it was only a little, she still felt extremely embarrassed. She looked at Mo Jingshan with a sullen face, begging him to let her off. Mo Jingshan's cold gaze did not even look at her. He turned to look at Miss Lin, who was stunned by the side. Do you want my people to help you, or do you want to do it yourself? Miss Lin did not expect that she would not be able to escape. She stood awkwardly on the spot. When she saw the bodyguards approaching, she was frightened into a low cry. She hugged her shoulders and squatted on the ground, crying. She refused to take off her gown no matter what. Miss Han's father could not stand it any longer. He could only turn to Jin Wan and say softly, Mrs. Mo, today's matter is our fault, but this matter, there are many people from the political world present. If this matter blows up, it won't be beneficial to anyone. His intention was for Jin Wan to plead for leniency. He was clear that if Jin Wan did not speak up right now, Mo Jingshan would settle the score with everyone present.
Jin Wan thought about it.
Although she did not have good intentions, she did not wish for Mo Jingshan to make a big fuss over her. She did not wish for her matters to implicate him. Furthermore, this was a matter between women. Jin Wan was about to raise her head from his embrace when she abruptly heard Mo Jingshan's voice above her head, using the people from the political world to warn her. Do you think this Mo is just a decoration here? Miss Han's father instantly felt awkward. Indeed. No one present dared to refute Mo Jingshan at this moment. Even the people from the political world had to give him some face. In such a situation, the people from the political world would only think of ways to quickly appease Mo Jingshan's anger. Who would dare to have any prejudice against Jin Wan, whom he was protecting in his embrace? Miss Han cried by the side while tugging at her clothes. Her movements were very slow. Mo Jingshan's gaze did not look in that direction. His hand caressed Jin Wan's head as he softly asked, Have you calmed down? Jin Wan nodded. Although it was indeed very satisfying, she still tugged on his sleeve to softly say, Just let them apologize. In the future, I still need to work in the business world. I can't leave too much of a shadow in the hearts of so many people. Otherwise, in the future, when these people see me, they will have to take a detour. The banquet hall was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. The only sound that could be heard was the rustling of Miss Han's clothes. Chapter 161. Miss Han thought that she could use this opportunity to escape. In the end, Jin Wan only glanced at her, a hint of a smile, yet not a smile, in the depths of her eyes. Although I didn't plan on taking things too far, if an apology can solve the problem, what's the point of having the police? Jin Wan's face was filled with a different kind of beauty. Her delicate brows were covered with a layer of frivolous mockery, and her voice was soft with a hint of coldness. Didn't this Jin Wan act as a little white flower in front of Mo Jingshan earlier? What was going on now? Relying on Mo Jingshan's support, She was starting to act again, wasn't she? Miss Han gritted her teeth and did not make a sound. Under her father's gaze, she had no choice but to maintain her apologetic attitude. Her face was red as she said, "It's only a glass of red wine." There's no need to call the police, right? Miss Lin, who was squatting on the ground and refusing to take off her clothes, abruptly stood up. Her eyes were filled with anger as she said, "So, Mo, I'm afraid you don't know how arrogant this Jean Wan is. Even if you don't help her, she can still stand on our heads. She's only pretending to be so kind and innocent because you're here. How could she be as delicate as you are right now? How disgusting." Jean Wan raised her brows. "Even now, you're still insisting that I didn't give you any face? Didn't you hear Miss Han's apology earlier? I'm the one who was wrongly accused. Do I have to be soft when trying to prove my innocence?" Miss Lin rolled her eyes at her and turned to look at Mo Jingshan. She did not believe that he would be tricked by Jean Wan's acting. After all, there were not many people who liked to see Jean Wan being so proud of herself. The few young ladies standing at the back saw that Miss Lin had taken the lead and directly agreed. "That's true. I didn't expect Mrs. Mo to be so good at acting. CEO Mo, the moment you arrived, she immediately dove into your embrace, looking so delicate. This change in mood is really shocking." This time, the hall once again filled with similar criticisms. The malicious intent from the few rich families' young ladies was so brazen. Many people wanted to see Jean Wan's truly despondent face, or her embarrassment when she was abandoned and ignored. Even if they were not tough enough in front of Mo Jingshan, she didn't believe that Jean Wan would be able to escape from so many people's accusations and doubts. Even if they couldn't skin her alive today, they had to make her a laughingstock. At this moment, Miss Han also took the opportunity to look at Mo Jingshan. Meeting the man's pitch-black eyes, her shrill voice trembled slightly and was even a little agitated. "CEO Mo, regarding the matter of wrongly accusing Mrs. Mo, I've already apologized. But earlier on, her ridicule toward me was indeed too much. I've always admired you, CEO Mo. Before you got married, I even tried to find an opportunity to meet you. At that time, my emotions were unstable, so I committed suicide by jumping off a building. To me, this matter is already a very negative past. Yet, Mrs. Mo actually dared to tear open my scars and ridicule me in front of everyone. There's nothing wrong with liking someone. Besides, it was before CEO Mo got married. Shouldn't she apologize to me?" Mo Jingshan calmly glanced at her. "Should I applaud you for jumping off a building to commit suicide, or should I view every woman who has fallen for me in a different light? What does your negative past and extreme way of handling things have to do with me?" Miss Han's expression was stiff and pale. I'm saying that earlier, Mrs. Mo revealed my scars. I've already apologized to her, so she should also. Mo Jingshan's tone was cold. "Do I look like someone who would uphold justice for someone unrelated to you? Or am I so free that I would seek justice for someone who wrongly accused my wife?" A woman who was unrelated to him was talking about her past to gain sympathy. Or perhaps it could be said that she was trying to gain his attention. However, in Mo Jingshan's eyes, aside from Jean Wan, everything else here had nothing to do with him. Miss Han bit her lip, her hand holding onto the clothes she had just taken off. Facing the man she had liked for a long time, she lowered her head in grievance. She choked out, but however, Mo Jingshan no longer looked at her. He turned toward the group of people who were trying to bully Jean Wan. His gaze was calm and did not change in the slightest. "As my wife, it doesn't matter if you're delicate or independent. When a woman should be soft, she should be soft. When she should be firm, she should be neither servile nor overbearing." The man's tone remained mild, but it caused the sensible people in the crowd to immediately shut their mouths. The hall once again descended into a strange silence. Miss Han took a deep breath. It was as though she was unwilling and filled with hatred. Her gaze shifted back and forth between Jean Wan and Mo Jingshan. All of a sudden, someone softly spoke from the crowd. "Miss Han, are you still going to take off your clothes?" The silence was broken. The last bit of rationality and self-esteem that Miss Han had maintained on her face was instantly shattered. That person's words seemed to have activated some sort of mechanism. Many of the people who were originally waiting to see Ji-won make a fool of herself now understood how they could protect themselves and prevent themselves from being implicated. People were often like this. Adding insult to injury was the greatest entertainment for these upper-class young ladies. No one cared about their moral bottom line. There had to be someone who could block this storm and protect everyone. At the same time, they had to appease the woman in Mo Jingshan's embrace. Perhaps they would be able to avoid a lot of trouble. Miss Han's eyes reddened. Her two hands gripped her clothes tightly, unwilling to continue taking them off. Seeing that Ji-won was completely in Mo Jingshan's embrace, she was about to die from anger. She gritted her teeth and spoke toward Ji-won. "The man you snatched from another woman is now protecting you in front of everyone. Mrs. Mo, you must be very proud, right?" Ji-won calmly glanced at her. She did not understand what she meant by the man who snatched from another woman. Mo Jingshan's calm gaze caused Miss Han to feel as though she had been shoved into an ice cave. Her entire body was cold, but she was still angered to the point of madness. Furthermore, the crowd's ridicule toward her had provoked her to the point of losing her rationality. She suppressed the fear in her heart and loudly said, "Ji-won, what's with that expression? Don't you know that Mo Jingshan was once engaged in America? He once had a fiancé." Miss Han had yet to finish her words when Feng Ling, who was standing in the middle of the bodyguards, abruptly kicked the back of her knee. She abruptly staggered and knelt onto the ground. "Why are you speaking so much nonsense when it's just taking off my clothes? Do you want me to help you?" Feng Ling coldly spoke. Chapter 162. Mo Jingshan's gaze was cold. Seeing Miss Han's frightened and unwilling gaze, he brought Ji-won, who had not spoken for a long time, into his embrace. Ji-won was silent for a moment before calmly saying, "Miss Han, you don't need to provoke me with such irrelevant words. Regardless of whether it's an ex-girlfriend or a so-called fiancé, in the face of our country's marriage laws, they are all equivalent to nothing. Do you know what a legal marriage is? Do you know what a wife is? Do I even need to tell you who this man belongs to?" Mo Jingshan lowered his eyes to look at her face. He watched as her red lips moved to and fro as she spat out these words. His eyes were filled with warmth, and there was even a faint smile on his face that could be seen by the others. Miss Han glared at her, unwilling to give up. Other people's engagement can be cancelled. So, what if you're married? Aren't you still able to divorce? After Ji-won was reborn, she was especially sensitive to the word divorce. She turned back and narrowed her eyes, coldly saying word by word, "I've already seen your sincerity in kneeling down to apologize. If you want to protect yourself, don't speak so much nonsense. No matter how much you say, isn't the result the same? You can't leave a single piece of clothing behind." From the start, Ji-won had never intended to let her take off her clothes. Since she wanted to make things so bad, then she was the one who asked for it. Feng Ling received Ji-won's words and stepped forward to kick Miss Han, who was trying to stand up. Miss Han knelt on the ground in pain. She wanted to say something, but was abruptly cut off by the man's cold voice. Mo Jingshan's gaze was cold. His low and deep voice was cold and indifferent. "I'll give you one more minute." Miss Han's entire body trembled. She glanced at her father pleadingly. Miss Han's father wanted to speak, but was blocked by several bodyguards dressed in black. He could not step forward. Miss Han dilly-dallied like this for more than a minute. She only managed to undo the zipper on her gown. Her hands were still tightly wrapped around her body. Mo Jingshan did not plan on wasting any more time here. His gaze landed on Feng Ling. Feng Ling immediately nodded in understanding. Rip! With a loud sound, Miss Han's clothes were instantly torn apart. As Miss Han screamed, Ji-won furrowed her brows but did not speak. Mo Jingshan had already led her away from the crowd. He did not even glance in that direction. When Mo Jingshan brought her out of the crowd, Ji-won's mind was no longer on the screams behind her. Mo Jingshan held her hand and left. He did not say another word, but her hand was held tightly by him. It had never been so tight before. It hurt a little. She raised her eyes to look at him, softly saying, "Jingshen." Mo Jingshen paused, loosening his grip on her hand. However, he still held onto her hand, saying, "Let's go home." Jinwon nodded.
Oh.
When he thought of checking to see if Miss Han had really been stripped clean, it was too late to turn back. She had already been taken out of the hotel where the banquet was held. Sheng Yihan was in the crowd, his eyes focused on the back of the woman who had disappeared in front of the door. His expression was calm, but there was a hint of a seductive smile at the corner of his mouth. By the time they returned to the Yew Garden, it was already very late. Auntie Chen had already fallen asleep. Mo Jingshen opened the bedroom windows. The cool night breeze blew in. The man's short black hair was blown into a rare mess, but it did not lose his elegance. Jinwon came out of the shower. Although he did not turn back to look at her, he still closed the windows the moment she stepped out of the bathroom to prevent her from catching a cold. "I didn't eat much tonight. You didn't eat either, did you?" Jinwon asked. The man's warm and deep gaze turned over. He calmly watched her for several seconds, his gaze carrying a penetrating scrutiny. After a moment, under her clear eyes, he calmly spat out a few words. "Don't you have anything to ask me?" Jinwon really did have something to ask, but when the words reached her lips, she hesitated. The so-called past that Shuyan once mentioned was most likely related to Mo Jingshen's engagement. Although she was not too clear about his past in America, she was certain that since Mo Jingshen did not deny this matter tonight, it meant that it was true. Since he had given her the opportunity to ask, she was certainly not willing to keep a knot in her heart. Jinwon walked over and stood before him, asking, "Before me, did you love any other woman?" Mo Jingshen rested one hand on the railing by the window, leaning against the blue reflection of the swimming pool in the Yew Garden. He watched her, raised his hand, and rubbed it against her damp hair that she had just showered. "No," he answered. Jinwon did not ask another word, and directly smiled. "Then I have nothing to ask." Seeing the woman's attitude, Mo Jingshen chuckled softly. He raised his hand to unbutton the top 3 buttons of a shirt. "Hungry? What do you want to eat?" "Go take a shower first. Auntie Chun is already asleep. I'll go cook 2 bowls of noodles. Although it's not as good as yours, at least it's edible." Jinwon spoke and turned to bring out his clothes, urging him to take a shower. Mo Jingshen looked at her frank and clean gaze. After a moment, he took the clothes. "All right." Jinwon was in the kitchen, watching the boiling water in the pot. It was not until the water had boiled for a long time that she remembered to put the noodles in. After hearing the sound, Annie Chin got up and put on a coat to help her cook. Jinwon declined and asked Annie Chin to go back to her room to rest. After cooking the noodles, she picked up a tray, put the 2 bowls of noodles on it, and carried them up. She had just returned to the room to put down the tray in her hands when she turned back to see the bathroom door open. The man casually wrapped a white bath towel around his waist. His skin was healthy and slightly whiter than the standard healthy man's, but he did not look feminine at all. His body was so standard that it could be described as perfect. His muscles were well-defined, and there were still water droplets rolling down his chest, hidden in the bath towel. Although they had lived together for so long, every time Jinwon saw this scene, she still wanted to push him back into the bathroom and let him put on his clothes before coming out. "Then try it. Ever since I ate the noodles you made that time, I haven't cooked noodles for a long time." Jinwon sat by the table as she spoke. She picked up her chopsticks and tasted a mouthful. Thankfully, when she was in the kitchen earlier, aside from being slightly distracted when boiling the water, she paid attention to the hardness of the noodles and did not cook them too badly. Although the taste was not as good as Mo Jingshen's, it was not bad either. Mo Jingshen glanced at her and was about to walk over when the little woman's mouth was full of noodles. She looked at him with her cheeks puffed up, saying vaguely, "Put on your clothes first." Mo Jingshen watched her eating manner and smiled. The windows were open earlier, so the room was slightly cold. He glanced at her again and turned to put on a bathrobe. Chapter 163. Let me try. Mo Jingshin walked over. Jin-won pushed the other bowl toward him, indicating for him to have a taste. However, the man pressed her outstretched hand down, lowering his head to kiss her lips that were still stained with broth. Jin-won, after sweeping away the taste of the broth in her mouth, he finally released her, mildly commenting, "It's not bad. The broth is delicious and very flavorful." Jin-won. This man was simply too much. He even wanted to take advantage of her while eating noodles. At night, Jin-won lifted the blanket to get off the bed. The moment she lifted the blanket, it was covered again. Jin-won frantically said, "I'm tired to death." She did not put any medicine in the noodles, yet she was bullied by Mo Jingshin for an entire night. Even now, her face was still red from the intense entanglement. She blushed and wanted to get up to drink some water. In the end, Mo Jingshin easily pulled her back. Jin-won's entire body was sore and weak. She curled up under his body and did not move. "Are you really tired?" He kissed the corner of her lips. "And I still have things to do in the studio tomorrow. You have to at least let me get out of bed," Jin-won said with resentment and anger. The man rubbed her head and carried her to take a shower. When he returned, he tucked her under the blanket and went to the study. Jin-won did not ask why he went to the study so late at night. She was really too tired. She flipped over, hugged the blanket, and fell asleep. When it was almost dawn, she suddenly woke up with a start. She reached to the side and felt the coldness of the bed. Mo Jingshin still had not returned to bed. She turned to look in the direction of the study. The light in the study was still on. 2 days later, it was said to be Nanheng's birthday. Coincidentally, Nanheng had just returned from America. Mo Jingshin had called to inform Ji-Nuan that he would bring her to Enchanting Club that night. Because the studio needed to receive many representatives from large real estate companies, Jin-won was busy until late. She knew the location of Enchanting Club and did not ask Mo Jingshin to pick her up. Instead, she had Feng Ling accompany her. After she was done with her work, they would head over together. Amethyst Town Clubhouse was the largest gathering place for the upper class in High City. Only people with platinum and diamond cards could enter. Because of this, even though the nightlife and entertainment programs were plentiful, there were very few illegal people who could sneak in. Every high-class private room was guarded by a waiter and security guards. Why didn't Jin-won come along? Chin Sighting sat on the sofa in the private room and glanced at Mo Jingshin, who was sitting alone, with a funny expression. Nanheng also turned his eyes, a hint of mockery on his handsome face. "I was just about to ask, you're just short of hanging Jin-won on your waist and bringing her with you every day. You actually didn't let anyone follow you today?" Mo Jingshin calmly replied, "She's busy." Chin Sighting mocked, "Your woman is busier than you? Is there a problem?" Mo Jingshin coldly glanced at him. A frivolous smile appeared on Chin Sighting's face. He stretched out his long legs and casually leaned back on the sofa. He sneered. "So it's your woman who isn't willing to be a good wife at home and wants to grow wings and fly out? Why didn't you stop her? Aren't you afraid that if she really achieves something, there will be more and more men behind her in the future? Good wife." Nanheng was confused. When did she become associated with these 3 words? Speaking of this, Chin Sighting glanced at Nanheng with some smugness. "You're the one who didn't have the fortune to taste it. Not long ago, Jin-won personally went to my house to make the fruit and vegetable salad and the 3 kinds of cold vegetables. The taste was really not bad. If it wasn't for the fact that there was a person who always shielded her, I would have been able to taste even more of her cooking. That big miss now knows how to cook. It doesn't seem too strange to use these 3 words on her." Nanheng chuckled lightly, lazily asking, "Are you serious?" Mo Jingshin glanced at the time. When he spoke again, his tone was cold and sharp. He played down his words. "What nonsense are you talking about? Did you arrange to meet here just to hear the 2 of you care about my woman?" Nanheng. Chin Sighting smiled mysteriously. "You'll get used to it." Nanheng's smoking addiction was great. Not long after, the private room was filled with smoke. Mo Jingshin had also drunk quite a bit earlier, but he was not drunk. He glanced at the time, stood up, and went to the restroom. Several minutes later, several young ladies in Enchanting Club were attracted by the man who had just walked out of the restroom. The drunken ladies egged each other on as they followed him. They secretly made bets to see who would be able to sleep with such a rare quality tonight. Mo Jingshan sensed that there were people following him. Seeing that they were several drunk ladies, he did not pay them any attention. When he entered the private room, he saw that quite a bit of wine had been brought in on the coffee table. There were red, blue, yellow, and all sorts of colors. He closed the door and was about to walk over when all of a sudden, the door behind him was slammed open. The sound of the door was too loud. Mo Jingshan's clear gaze turned back. Even Nan Hung and Qin Sighting in the private room raised their brows, looking at the drunken ladies by the door. Seeing this situation, Qin Sighting instantly understood. He chuckled softly and whistled. Yo, you're being pestered again. If Jin Wan were to see this, I wonder if she would be jealous. Mo Jingshan pretended not to hear Qin Sighting's words. His gaze coldly swept over the few young ladies whose faces clearly showed that they wanted to sleep with him. Get out. His voice did not contain any warmth. The few young ladies all reeked of alcohol. Originally, they were quite bold, but the moment they saw the coldness in his eyes, as well as the man's cold, icy aura, they all cowered. Only one of the young ladies was pushed out. It was unknown whether it was because her face was too red or because she had drunk too much, but she stared at him with a red face. Her mouth stuttered as she squeezed out a complete sentence. I think you're very handsome. I like you so, can you? No. His cold and indifferent voice was as cold as frost. It was cold, straightforward, and decisive. The few young ladies immediately stared at him with defeated expressions. They had thought that they would be able to have an extremely romantic encounter, but who would have thought that it was actually an iceberg? By the side, the security guards had already heard the commotion and were about to chase them away. The few young ladies originally wanted to say something more, but they were directly slammed out by the door in front of them with a pung. Outside the door, there was a moment of silence. Then, there was the sound of the security guards chasing them away. However, there was a sudden burst of laughter from inside the door. As expected of CEO Mo, your luck with women is not as good as before. Nanhung held a cigarette in his mouth, smiling with narrowed eyes. Too much nonsense. Mo Jingshan did not look at them. He picked up his phone and called Jin Wan. Chapter 164. The domestic property industry would have more and more room to grow. She and BGY's CEO sat in the conference room, sharing their opinions on the domestic property industry. Every word Jin Wan said hit the nail on the head, causing BGY's CEO to anticipate the next collaboration with Immerse Studio even more. Just as they were chatting excitedly, the phone on the conference table began to vibrate. Jin Wan did not look at the caller ID and casually hung up the call. She then continued to speak with a smile. In Enchanting Club, Mo Jingshan heard the sound of the call being hung up and glanced at the phone screen. Nanhung glanced at the man who had yet to step out of the private room with his phone in his hand. He asked with a teasing expression, "What's with that expression? Did Jin Wan hang up on you?" Mo Jingshan did not speak. This little woman had really learned to hang up on him. Earlier on, when Qin Sighting said that he had actually allowed Jin Wan to grow a pair of wings and fly away, he finally began to consider this matter. The 20-year-old Jin Wan still had too much room to learn and grow. Thinking of the day when she truly grew up and was reborn, transforming into the so-called COG that he would no longer be able to control, Mo Jingshan narrowed his eyes slightly. Qin Sighting sat calmly on the other side of the sofa, drinking his wine. He gently swirled the white wine in his glass, smiling. Jin Wan is truly the first person who dares to hang up on you. When she comes, I'll have to praise her properly. She's really good. Qin Sighting paused for a moment before speaking again. It's already late. Don't let anything happen. Should we go take a look at her? Nanhung glanced at the time. With Feng Ling by her side, there won't be any problems. This call was definitely hung up on her. I placed my most capable assistant by his woman's side. If something still happens, Wouldn't I be letting down the many years of nurturing Feng Ling down? Mo Jingshan walked over. Before returning to the sofa, he kicked away Nan Heng's leg that was placed on the crystal coffee table. After sitting down, he said indifferently, "If I don't get Feng Ling away from your side, I'm afraid you'll die in her hands." Nan Heng suddenly choked on a mouthful of smoke. He coughed until his eyes became bloodshot before he said with difficulty, "What the F***ck, do you mean I'll die in her hands?" Mo Jingshan coldly sneered. "It seems like you've been very free recently."
What?
"I'm very free. Do you want to fight me?" Nan Heng narrowed his eyes with a cigarette in his mouth. "Don't you too? If you want to kill each other, stay away from me. I don't want to drag two seriously injured patients back to the hospital in the middle of the night. It's rare that I'm not on the night shift today." Half an hour later, Jinwan finally appeared at Zijingqing Club. The security guard led the way to the designated private room. Pushing the door open, he saw that the private room inside was very spacious. There were sofas, coffee tables, vertical microphones, and many other facilities that only high-class clubs would have. There were only 3 people sitting inside: Mo Jingshan, Nan Heng, and Qin Sighting. Right now, Qin Sighting could be considered an old acquaintance. To Jin Wan, Nan Heng was someone she had only heard of, but never met. It was said that he usually stayed in America for a longer period of time and was involved in the arms business. He had once made a name for himself in Haicheng and later on became famous in America. The moment she opened the door, Mo Jingshan's heavy eyes turned toward her. He said, "Nuan, come over and sit." Jin Wan nodded and was about to go over when she abruptly saw Nan Heng's unbearable expression. It was as though he had goosebumps. "I say, you guys, you can kiss me however you want at home. Can't you take note that this is a public place?" Nan Heng coldly reprimanded. After knowing Mo Jingshan for so many years, they had never seen him take such initiative toward anyone, much less in such an intimate and passionate manner. It really broke through the limits of what they could accept. Mo Jingshan coldly glanced at him. "Move your feet away." Nan Heng. He really wanted to curse, but he endured it. He turned to see that Jin Wan had already walked over. Nan Heng's feet were placed on the coffee table, blocking the way. As he retracted his feet, he glanced toward the door. After sending Jin Wan to the door, Feng Ling dutifully stood outside the door. She turned to stand with the bodyguards by the door. "What are you standing outside for?"
Come in.
Nan Heng suppressed his voice. It was cold and commanding. Earlier, Jin Wan had also planned to let Feng Ling in, but Feng Ling did not enter. She had just sat down by Mo Jingshan's side when she raised her eyes to speak to Feng Ling outside the door. "That's right.
Come in."
It's not like you're an outsider." Feng Ling remained standing outside the door.
She did not speak.
Her gaze swept past Nan Heng's face, but it was only a calm and indifferent glance. She did not greet her former boss and shifted her gaze back to Jin Wan. "This kind of occasion is not suitable for me. Mrs. Mo, I'll stand guard outside the door."
Call me if there's anything.
After speaking, she directly closed the door from the outside. There was a strange silence in the private room. Jin Wan was used to Feng Ling's cold and stubborn temper. Seeing that the door had already been closed from the outside, she did not force it further. Mo Jingshan watched Jin Wan's face and handed the wine list on the coffee table to her. "What do you want to drink?" Jin Wan lowered her head to look at the wine list and then at the many good wines on the coffee table. She smiled to say, "There's no need to go through so much trouble. There's so much wine.
I'll just drink with you."
In the end, Mo Jingshan took the wine list from her hand and pressed the bell to call the bar's waiter in. He ordered a cup of hot juice and a fruit platter for her. Only after the waiter took the order and left did Mo Jingshan say, "I've said it before. In the future, don't even think about touching wine. I can't drink much. Not even a sip." Ever since Feng Ling closed the door, Nan Heng's expression had been dark. Even now, he could hear the two of them still crazily showing off their affection. Unable to tolerate it, he glanced at Jin Wan and sneered. "Earlier on, didn't this woman have the guts to hang up on you? In the blink of an eye, she's become a little sweetheart? Even a cup of juice has to be heated. How delicate is she? Qin Siding casually poured the wine. I've already seen it. You still need to get used to it. But from a medical point of view, women should drink less cold and try to drink more hot. It's good for the body. Nan Hung coldly scolded, narrowing his eyes to sneer. As expected, you've been tormented badly. Your mind is so muddled that you're about to cheer for this couple. Qin Siding's smile was still casual. Do you think it's easy for your brother? I think I've most likely been abused by the two of them for so long that I've developed Stockholm Syndrome. I'm used to it. If they don't abuse me for 2 days, I won't be able to get used to it. Nan Hung leaned against the sofa and changed the topic, coldly saying, You want to be abused that much? All right, I'll grant you your wish. Qin Siding raised his eyes to look at him. Grant what? Chapter 165. She hung up on Mo Jingshan's call. Jinwon picked up her phone and saw that there was indeed a missed call from him. She whispered to the man sitting by her side. Earlier on, I was talking to someone from BGY Group and didn't notice that it was you who called me. I directly hung up and rushed over afterward. I didn't look at my phone at all. Mo Jingshan glanced at her, asking softly, Did you succeed? Jinwon nodded at him happily. She raised her hand and gestured, 2 with one hand and 8 with the other. She winked at him. After selling this amount and tossing aside the cost, the money we earned should be enough to temporarily hand in a satisfactory answer to your father, right? Mo Jingshan's gaze was deep as he pressed her hand down. Even if you can't hand in this answer, he can't touch you. There's no need to work so hard. Hearing this, Qin Siding smiled. What? Hasn't Director Mo already returned to America? He still hasn't let Jinwon off. Mo Jingshan did not look at Qin Siding. Instead, he lowered his head to look at Jinwon. Have you eaten tonight? No, I was just about to say. Jinwon glanced at the various types of alcohol on the coffee table. Isn't today Nanhang's birthday? I've been here for so long. Why haven't I seen any cake? She had thought that she would be able to eat a few bites of cake. Furthermore, she had rushed over after finishing her work and did not even have a bite of rice. Qin Siding raised his brows, casually saying, I just finished an operation at the hospital and drove over. Where would I have the time to buy a cake? Jinwon faltered for a moment before turning to look at Mo Jingshan. Mo Jingshan mildly glanced at her. Do I look like someone who would specially buy a cake to celebrate a man's birthday? Jinwon pursed her lips. Then what should we do? Even if you don't like to eat cake, since it's your birthday, there has to be some form. If I had known earlier, I would have given you a call earlier. Earlier on, I happened to pass by a pretty good cake shop. Which shop? Get your female bodyguard to buy it, Qin Siding said. When Nan Hung heard the words female bodyguard, he coldly glanced at him. There's no need. Someone will come later. She will probably buy it. Who? Aren't there just the few of us today? Qin Siding glanced at him. Nan Hung smiled and casually leaned back on the sofa. He glanced at Qin Siding without saying a word. His gaze seemed to be saying, Brat, just wait to be tortured. Qin Siding's handsome brows moved. After a moment of silence, he seemed to have thought of something, and his face suddenly turned cold. You can't be, suddenly. The door to the private room was pushed open, and a figure carrying an exquisite cake box appeared in front of the door. Jinwon looked straight ahead. It was a woman. Her figure was slim and slender, her skin was fair, and her eyes were calm and gentle. She should be about the same age as Jinwon. Her long, slightly curly hair was spread out behind her back. She had an outstanding temperament, but did not have much lethality. She was carrying a large cake box in her hand. Sorry, I'm late. The young woman came in with a natural and appropriate smile. She glanced at the faces of the people on the sofa and paused a little longer on Qin Siding's cold face, but only for a fraction of a second. Then she looked at Nan Hung and Mo Jingshan with a smile. At the same time, she smiled at Jinwon. Hello, you're Jinwon, right? We've met before, but you definitely don't remember. I'm sure Nianj. Mister? Hearing this, Jinwon finally had an impression. Sure Nianj, the daughter of Haicheng Shida International Group. She was 2 years older than Jin Wan. The Shi family lived in America, and their domestic company was in Haicheng. Jin Wan had indeed met her before, but it was only when Jin Wan and Ji Hongwen attended a banquet several years ago. There was even a rumor that Shi Nianj was the only one who could compare to Jin Wan in terms of beauty. If it weren't for the fact that the Shi family was not in Haicheng, the two of them would definitely be the two most famous flowers in Haicheng. The two did not have much contact. When Shi Nianj was in Haicheng, Jin Wan was studying abroad. When Jin Wan returned, Shi Nianj had already returned to America. Otherwise, they might have become very good friends. Jin Wan stood up, took the cake for her, and placed it on the coffee table. She said sincerely, "It's really been many years since we last met. Miss Shi, why have you returned? Will you settle in Haicheng or return to America?" The Shi family's domestic headquarters will remain in Haicheng. Perhaps I will stay, but there may also be other changes. As Shi Nianj spoke, she glanced at Nan Heng. "I brought the cake so late. I didn't spoil your mood, did I?" "No, you came just in time. Mrs. Mo was just complaining about why there was no cake," Nan Heng said, his gaze meaningfully glancing at Qin Siding, who had not spoken a single word. Jin Wan felt that the atmosphere was different from what she had expected. She glanced at Nan Heng and then at Qin Siding. She felt that Qin Siding seemed to be surrounded by a cold aura, suppressing a gloomy coldness that she had never seen before. She turned to look at Mo Jingshan. Mo Jingshan did not even raise his eyes. He continued drinking the wine in his glass, clearly unconcerned. "I ordered the cake yesterday. Earlier on, when I was about to collect it, I found out that their dessert chef had applied for a leave and would only be back in the afternoon. He only started making it in the afternoon, so I waited for a long time." As Shi Nianj spoke, she opened the cake box with a smile. She said to Jin Wan, "When did Miss Ji get married? I didn't even get a cup of wedding wine to drink." As she spoke, she glanced at Mo Jingshan. "CEO Mo didn't even send a wedding invitation to our Shi family. Isn't that too ungrateful? Sit down and talk." Mo Jingshan indicated for them to sit down. Jin Wan and Shi Nianj opened the cake together and took out the candles. She then pulled Shi Nianj to sit by the side. All of a sudden, Qin Siding stood up, picked up his coat from the sofa, and said coldly and casually, "I still have something to do. I'll leave first." Shi Nianj paused, standing by the sofa, without moving. However, Jin Wan turned to look at the man with a cold expression. She also felt that the atmosphere was not right. Her gaze moved from Qin Siding's back to Shi Nianj's slightly stiff and pale face. What was going on? Qin Siding left very decisively. He did not even look back. When he closed the door from outside, he used a lot of force. The door was basically slammed shut by him.
Pum.
The waiter, who was carrying hot fruit juice and a fruit platter in, was startled by the sound of the door opening and almost dropped it. Outside the door, Feng Ling saw Qin Siding walk out with a heavy expression and stood silently by the side. Jin Wan turned to look at Nan Heng and Mo Jingshan. "What happened? Dr. Qin left just like that? You didn't stop him?" Chapter 166. Based on a woman's intuition, Jin Wan felt that there was a story between Shi Nianj and Qin Siding. At this moment, Mo Jingshan opened his mouth, coldly and indifferently. "What are you thinking? You brought her here? I've interacted with Miss Shi in America before. After all, we're old acquaintances. It's my birthday, and she wants to send me a cake. Although I understand that she didn't come here to celebrate my birthday, I can't possibly reject her." Nan Heng puffed out a smoke ring, coldly smiling. "She's the one who refused to give up. She knows old Qin's temper better than us. She should know the consequences of coming here today." Nan Heng then glanced at Shi Nianj, who had been standing there silently. "Back then, the one who provoked him was you. The one who left as he pleased was also you. Now that you're back, even though you know his attitude, you still insisted on coming. Now do you see it? He won't even look at you again." Shi Nianj did not speak. When Jin Wan reached out to hold her hand out of concern, She only curved her lips slightly. Her gaze was hidden in the shadows of the private room, and her emotions could not be discerned. At this moment, outside the private room, a commotion came from afar. It sounded like a woman's sharp cries and screams, as well as the sound of many people's footsteps. Enchanting had not walked far out of the private room. He did not stop because of the gathering crowd and the cries. However, as he walked past the crowd, he abruptly heard the sound of a woman being slapped. Accompanied by several men's roguish curses, he expressionlessly turned to look at the crowd. He abruptly saw the woman lying on the ground in a sorry state. His cold eyes slowly narrowed. He pushed aside the people in front of him and turned to walk over. The commotion outside was not small. Many people in the private room came out to see the situation. Enchanting opened the door to the private room and saw Enchanting from afar. Enchanting saw the crowd there and subconsciously walked out with Enchanting. No matter how strict the management of Zijingqing Club was, it was still a nightclub. It was not safe for two women to go out. Enchanting stood up and went over. Nanheng could only extinguish his cigarette, furrowing his brows as he went out to check on the situation. In the crowd, a young woman was lying on the ground. She had just been slapped twice, and her clothes were a little messy. Her shoulders were half exposed, as if she had almost been molested. Her hair was also unusually messy, almost covering half of her face. However, one could still see that her face was pale with fright, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Enchanting had just walked into the crowd when she saw the woman on the ground. Her calm expression changed slightly. She subconsciously raised her eyes to look at the cold Enchanting. Enchanting paused in her steps. When Enchanting came over, she turned back to whisper to him, "What happened tonight? I don't seem to understand it." Enchanting had already seen the situation in the crowd. He held her hand and did not let her go to the front. He said mildly, "Enchanting has his own business. You don't have to care." Enchanting. Which woman doesn't have a burning desire for gossip? Enchanting could only turn her head to look. Nanheng stood at the side, arms crossed over his chest, and said coldly in a low voice, "What an unexpected coincidence today. Enchanting's two old loves are both here." Old love? Or two? Enchanting looked in surprise at Enchanting in front of her, and then at the young woman on the ground who was surrounded by the crowd. Then Enchanting's gossipy eyes turned to Nanheng. Nanheng coldly sneered. The only person this old Qin has ever loved is Enchanting. But right now, it's not clear whether he loves her or not, but he definitely hates her. Nanheng coldly glanced at the woman on the ground in the crowd. This is Ling Xianer. About 4 or 5 years ago, she had an engagement with Enchanting. The engagement was arranged by the Qin family, but Enchanting rejected it, and it was cancelled a long time ago. This Ling Xianer is very infatuated with Enchanting. She is young and very good at causing trouble. After being rejected, she cried, threw a tantrum, and threatened to hang herself. Enchanting did not even spare her a glance. From then on, the Ling family's relationship with the Qin family gradually worsened, and they no longer had any contact. As Nanheng spoke, Enchanting stood by the side and could more or less hear him. However, she did not move, only looking in Enchanting's direction. Nanheng appeared to be watching the show. "Miss Ji, no matter how oblivious you are to the outside world, you should know that at the beginning of this year, Haicheng's largest electronics company, the Ling Group, announced bankruptcy. Several of the board members of the Ling Group made a wrong decision, causing the company to collapse. Not only did it go bankrupt, but it also owes a huge debt. No one knows how this Ling Xianer was sold here, but from the looks of it, the people by the side should be her buyers. She should have just escaped." Enchanting's hands suddenly grew cold. She had experienced this before, so she understood the horror and helplessness of it all too well. This was the reality of the world. How many people were watching a big company from behind? Once it was down, there was no need to ask for help. As long as it didn't make things worse, it was already very good. Sensing Enchanting's sudden silence, Enchanting held her hand in his palm. "It has nothing to do with you. Don't let your imagination run wild." Ling Xianer was forced to retreat step by step by those men. She laid on the ground and carefully shifted her body to the side. Her eyes were filled with fear and despair. Jinwan felt as though she was looking at herself from her previous life. Mo Jingshan's gaze remained on her face. Seeing that her face was gradually turning pale, he asked softly, "Are you not feeling well?" Jinwan composed herself. "Perhaps there are too many people here, and I'm a little lacking in oxygen. I'm fine. Stop looking. Let's go back." Mo Jingshan directly grabbed her hand, wanting to bring her away. At this moment, Ling Xianer, who was on the ground, suddenly cried out in pain. A man dragged her back several meters and stepped on her calf. Jinwan turned back to see the drunken and malevolent man standing there scolding, "Smelly whore, why are you pretending to be a chaste woman after taking this old man's money? 80,000 yuan to buy your first night is already giving your Ling family some face. Otherwise, people might not even be willing to pay 8,000 for a night. Since you've already been sold, and your clothes have already been changed, why are you still pretending?" Ling Xianer lay on the ground crying, shaking her head nonstop. "I'm not selling. I'm not the one receiving the money. Please let me go. I beg you, ah." The last sound was because the man had harshly stepped on her calf. Chapter 167. I'm begging you to let me go. Beg? If begging was useful, your family wouldn't have gone bankrupt. The man laughed coldly as he grabbed her hair harshly. "We've waited in the room for so long, and you King ran off just like that? Dampening our mood isn't as simple as returning 80,000 yuan. You want your freedom, right? Then ask the people around you. Those who are able to come to Zijingcheng don't lack money. Who do you think will buy you? My price isn't high either. 10 times. How about it? 800,000 yuan." Ling Xianer cried out in despair. Her sharp cries only attracted the attention of the surrounding people. No one stepped forward. Jinwan trembled when she heard the cries. The scenes from her past life that she had tried so hard to forget kept drilling into her mind, making it hard for her to breathe. She suppressed her heartbeat that was about to jump to her throat. She could not help but turn back and push the crowd aside. She was about to shout that she would buy it. Wasn't it just 800,000 yuan? She would buy it. "I'll buy it." Suddenly, someone spoke up. However, this voice did not come from Jinwan. It was Enchanting. The moment she heard this name, Ling Xianer raised her disheveled face in disbelief. When she saw that it was Enchanting in the crowd, she immediately burst into tears. Her tears were filled with sorrow and despair, as though she had finally found a glimmer of hope. That kind of complicated sorrow was indescribable. The moment Enchanting spoke, Nian's gaze shifted in his direction. It was as though something was gradually shattering in her eyes. However, Enchanting did not even glance at her. He only coldly said, "I've bought it. Why aren't you letting her go?" Those who were able to appear in Zijingcheng's clubhouse were all people of high status. The Qin family was one of Hai Cheng's 4 largest families. They were naturally prominent. The man who grabbed Ling Xianer recognized Enchanting. The curses he was about to spit out were immediately swallowed back. He asked with some suspicion, "Young Master Qin, are you sure you want to buy her?" "I won't repeat myself." Enchanting's eyes were cold. The man could only let go. The moment Ling Xianer regained her freedom, she stumbled towards Enchanting and then stumbled in front of him. Enchanting expressionlessly avoided her outstretched hand and did not let her touch him. He maintained a distance, but he threw the jacket in the crook of his arm to Ling Xianer, who almost had half her body exposed. Ling Xianer's entire body trembled, and she didn't dare to touch him again. She hurriedly wrapped his jacket around her body, then carefully shrunk her head and hid behind him, instinctively seeking his protection. The surrounding spectators had already begun to whisper among themselves. They were discussing how Ling Xianer seemed to have been engaged to this young master of the Qin family in the past. Although the two of them didn't succeed, they didn't think that after so many years, young Master Qin would still be so loyal. Nian had been watching Enchanting the entire time. When Ling Xianer ran behind him, Her eyes were still fixed in his direction. However, Qin's sighting did not look at her at all. The crowd gradually dispersed, and this farce finally came to an end. Jinwan turned to realize that Nianj had already left without her noticing. When did Mr. leave? The scene earlier was enough to shred her heart into 1,000 pieces. She still hasn't left. Could it be that she wants to stand here and wait for us to say a few hypocritical words of comfort to her? Nanheng stood by the side, holding a bronze-colored lighter in his hand as he absent-mindedly played with it. As he spoke, he glanced at Jinwan. Your complexion is indeed not good. If I didn't know better, I would have thought that the person who was pressed to the ground and bullied was not that Miss Ling, but you. Mo Jingshan's gaze remained on Jinwan's brows. Are you still not feeling well? He did see that Jinwan's complexion was different from usual. The emotions that flashed across her eyes did not escape his eyes. Jinwan shook her head, indicating that she was fine. She then turned to glare at Nanheng, whose words had almost hit her weak spot. Earlier, I just couldn't bear to watch any longer. The people in this club are all wealthy and respectable. Just eating a seafood meal flown in from overseas can cost several 100,000 yuan. Earlier, when a life could have been saved, no one helped out. Nanheng spread his hands. The business world is a place that eats people's blood. These are all nobles who have made their way through society. Everyone knows who they can't touch. She's just a young lady from a bankrupt company. The Ling family is gradually declining due to revenge, so there are many potential enemies. Who would offend someone for such a useless young lady? Jinwan's red lips curved. Her smile was mild. You guys really know how to find a suitable excuse for your cold-blooded and heartless actions. Nanheng raised his brows, chuckling. When did Miss Ji become someone who hates evil so much? Jinwan did not say more, but it was clear that she was not in a good mood. Nanheng sneered and walked back. What a mess. I haven't even celebrated my King birthday, and I'm already here to watch this kind of melodramatic drama at 8 o'clock. Let old Qin deal with it himself. Didn't they say that women would be in a good mood after eating cake? Miss Ji, let's go back to the private room to eat the cake. Jinwan. What a big heart. Mo Jingshan did not look at Nanheng. He lowered his eyes to look at Jinwan. Do you want to go home or eat cake? Let's eat the cake. Even though Miss Sher has left, she still bought this cake specially for us. It'll be a waste if we don't eat it. In order to eat a few pieces of cake, Jinwan dragged Mo Jingshan back to the private room. She originally wanted Nanheng, who was celebrating his birthday today, to cut the cake. However, Nanheng threw the knife and fork in front of her. If you want to eat it, cut it yourself. I'm not interested in sweet things like this. Seeing that Mo Jingshan had no intention of eating it, Jinwan cut a few pieces herself and tasted the cream that she accidentally spilled on her fingers. Very sweet. It was cherry-flavored, and there was even a hint of cherry wine in the cream. Nanheng and Mo Jingshan chatted about their business dealings. In the meantime, a waiter would occasionally come in to deliver wine and fruit juice for Jinwan. Jinwan did not eat tonight, so she finished half of the 10-inch double-layered cake by herself. She also drank 3 to 4 glasses of fruit juice. Even when it ended, Nianj did not return. Qin's sightings' whereabouts were also unknown. They were about to leave the private room, and Jinwan followed them. However, when she stood up, she leaned against Mo Jingshan's body. Her steps were light, and her cheeks were slightly red. Her gaze was hazy as she lazily leaned against his shoulder. Mo Jingshan saw that she was clearly slightly drunk and directly held her to prevent her from falling. His cold brows furrowed. He clearly did not expect that she could get drunk like this. Is she drunk? Nanheng was about to leave when he turned back to take a look. Chapter 168. Nanheng snorted. In a place like Zijing City, there has never been any pure fruit juice. The so-called fruit juice also contains very low alcohol content, around 6 to 10 degrees. It's basically impossible to taste. But if you can get drunk like this, how bad is your alcohol tolerance, Miss Ji? Jinwan opened her eyes in a daze to look at Mo Jingshan. Is that so? Mo Jingshin did not speak. As he supported her, his indifferent gaze shifted to the remaining half of the cake on the coffee table. Nanheng seemed to have thought of something. He first looked at Jin Wan's slightly drunk appearance, then at the cake, and walked over. He cut a piece into his mouth, took 2 bites and swallowed, enduring the unbearably sweet taste. He turned back to look at the person by the door and sneered. There's fruit wine in this cream. The alcohol content isn't low. Together with her fruit juice, it's no wonder she's so drunk. Jin Wan tried her best to open her eyes, raising her brows to say, I remember now. There really is a very special cake shop in Haicheng. Every day, there are always people lining up to buy the cake. It's said that the cream in that shop usually contains some carefully brewed, high-end fruit wine. No wonder the taste is different. It's really delicious. As she spoke, she pressed her face against Mo Jingshin's shoulder with a grin, softly saying, In the future, I still want to eat it when it's my birthday. I still want to eat this cake. No matter how much she calculated, in the end, she was still drunk on the cake. Mo Jingshin supported her, pressing her firmly by his side. He coldly said, With your alcohol tolerance, you better stay away from that cake shop in the future. No, I want to eat it on my birthday. Jin Wan raised her misty eyes and raised a finger, giggling at him. I want to eat it again. I don't want 2 layers. Just 1 layer, all right? It's fine if I eat a little less. Mo Jingshin did not speak. She pressed against his arm again, hugging him with both hands. All right. I'll eat it on my birthday, only on my birthday. Mo Jingshin had no choice but to bend slightly toward her. Watching this drunken little woman, he softly sighed and kissed the tip of her nose. All right. Nanheng pressed the space between his eyebrows and crossed his arms over his chest as he leaned against the decorative pillar in the private room. After knowing Mo Jingshin for so many years, she had never seen him treat anyone so gently and patiently. Fengling walked in from the door. Mr. Mo, shall I send you and Mrs. Mo back? There's no need. The Yew Garden is very close to here, Mo Jingshin said indifferently. Nanheng also drank quite a bit. Send him back. Fengling's expression did not change. After a few seconds of silence, she said, All right, Mr. Mo. Jin Wan was brought to the car by Mo Jingshin. She was not very drunk, but she sat lazily and pressed her head against the window. Realizing that the person driving was Mo Jingshin and not Fengling, Jin Wan narrowed her eyes and glanced at the handsome man in the driver's seat.
She then leaned toward him.
Sit properly, I'm driving. Mo Jingshin was about to push her back. However, Jin Wan hugged his arm and moved closer to his side. She pressed her face against his neck and softly asked, Is my alcohol tolerance that bad? Mo Jingshin glanced at her. It went without saying. Whether her alcohol tolerance was bad or not, based on her current state, was there a need for him to say it? Jin Wan saw his gaze and opened her mouth to bite down on the side of his neck. She did not bite too hard, and the tip of her tongue inadvertently licked his neck. After several seconds, she was about to pull back when the man abruptly pulled out one hand from the steering wheel, holding her waist and pressing her against him. His low and hoarse voice bit by her ear. You're getting more and more daring. You dare to directly seduce me in the car, En? Looking at the man's deep gaze, Jin Wan narrowed her eyes and smiled at him. She moved closer to his ear to whisper, Why wouldn't I dare? Mo Jingshin's brows moved. The car slowed down and drove slowly by the roadside. He kissed her lips and stared at her with his dark eyes. He was about to kiss her again. However, Jin Wan suddenly said, What a pity. Great Aunt is coming again. The man who was about to kiss her abruptly paused. He stared at her for a long time, and just as Jin Wan was smiling at him in delight, he abruptly kissed her harshly on the lips. At the same time, he stopped the car. He kissed this little woman who dared to show off in front of him just because she was on her period until she begged for mercy. Only then did he let her go. In the end, he kissed her lips that were much rosier than usual, sometimes deep and sometimes heavy. He said in a low voice, Last time at Wonley's Starry Sky Hotel, I still haven't satisfied your request. Isn't this a good opportunity? With the help of the alcohol, Jin Wan stared at the man who looked like he couldn't wait to press her into the car. She suddenly raised her hand and pressed it hard against his face. She squeezed hard until his handsome face changed shape. Then she chuckled, puckered her lips, and kissed him on the lips. The man's gaze darkened. Unknowingly, she continued to hold his face to say, "Then you have to agree to a request of mine." She still knew how to raise conditions when she was so drunk. Mo Jingshin glanced at her. She stared at Mo Jingshin's dark, sea-like eyes with a hint of drunkenness. Previously, in order for me to inherit the G Corporation, my father had already enrolled me in a business management class in T-City. However, I never went. It's been at least 2 to 3 years. Mo Jingshin understood the meaning behind her words. His gaze darkened. You want to go now? Jinwon nodded. The school is T University. The professor in T University's business department is very famous. Right now, many of the managers of well-known companies in the country are his students. That's why I'm looking forward to it. The little woman's attitude was originally very soft when she was discussing with him. Furthermore, she was slightly drunk, and her voice was even softer and sweeter. Mo Jingshin pinched her flushed face. I'll consider this matter. We'll talk about it when you're sober tomorrow. Jinwon chuckled and suddenly reached out to hug his neck. All right. Mo Jingshin glanced at the streetlights outside the car. He pulled her arm away and had her sit properly. He then went to drive the car. Before they reached the U Garden, Jinwon had already fallen asleep. Mo Jingshin glanced at the little woman who had just raised a condition with him, but now wanted to sleep first. He laughed angrily. He really could not let her touch even a little alcohol. The car stopped at the U Garden's parking lot. Mo Jingshin alighted first. He walked around the car to open the door and carry the little woman who was sleeping so soundly out. The lighting in the parking lot was not too bright. When it landed on the man's body, it was half bright and half dark. It gave off a hazy feeling. Jinwon opened her eyes in a daze and looked at him. She reached out and hugged his neck, burying her face in his neck. Chapter 169. What Nanheng said today was right. Sometimes, you can't blame others for being too cold-blooded. You can only blame yourself for not being strong enough, Jinwon said softly in his embrace. Jinwon was slightly drunk tonight. Mo Jingshin watched her for a long time, but did not say anything. He carried her back to the villa. After entering, she continued to hug his neck, watching his handsome face. I need to work harder to catch up to your footsteps, work harder to support my new life. The words new life caused the man's footsteps to pause for a moment. However, it was only for a moment. He carried her back to the room, leaning over to place her on the bed. Watching the drunken little woman, he supported himself against her body, watching her as he calmly said, "In the future, you're not allowed to touch alcohol." It seemed like in the future, even if it was a cake, he had to taste it for her first. Previously, he promised her about the cake. He took it back. Mo Jingshin. I want to become strong. I want to become very strong. I want to be strong enough that I don't need other people's pity or help. I want to be able to control my own life. I want to be strong enough that I don't fear any risks of life and death. I also want... The man abruptly lowered his head to kiss her, kissing back the grand wishes on her lips. Jinwon was already drunk. After being kissed for a while, she really could not speak and decided not to speak. She closed her eyes and hugged his neck. Jinwon quickly fell asleep. Mo Jingshin lowered his head to watch her. Jinwon woke up in the middle of the night to find that Mo Jingshin was not by her side. She sat up and rubbed her slightly messy hair. She then kicked the bed, pushed open the study door and the balcony window, but did not see any trace of Mo Jingshin. She stood on the balcony and looked down. On the U Gardens parking lot, the black ghost was not parked where it was supposed to be. She did not know when it had been driven away. She did not intend to be so drunk today, but the fruit wine and the cake mixed with the alcohol in the juice caused her head to ache even after she fell asleep. Even after standing on the balcony in the cold wind for several minutes, she was still unable to wake up. Her head was still aching. She rubbed her forehead and turned to return to the room. She closed the windows and threw herself onto the bed. She grabbed her phone by the bedside, wanting to call Mo Jingshan. However, all she heard was a mechanical female voice. "I'm sorry, the number you have dialed is currently busy." Jean Wan tossed her phone aside. Her head really hurt. She grabbed the pillow and pressed it against her head, forcing herself to continue sleeping. The black ghost sped along the road. Mo Jingshan called Nanheng. The call was quickly connected. Nanheng was a little drunk, and his tone was lazy. "I thought after you sent Jean Wan back, you and your woman would have sex at home and wouldn't have time to come out." Mo Jingshan. At this time, he did not plan to leave Jean Wan alone at home. The little woman was drunk and would occasionally talk in her sleep. She was also on her period. After helping her bathe and change into her pajamas, he was still wide awake. If it weren't for this, he wouldn't have come out with a single call from Nanheng. "Didn't you just drink tonight? Why did you go to Qin Siding's place to drink again?" Mo Jingshan asked coldly. In Qin Siding's villa, Nanheng sat on the sofa, narrowing his eyes to look at the bright lights in the villa area outside the window. He then glanced at Qin Siding, who was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows with a dark and cold expression. He chuckled and said, "This old man was afraid that he would take things too hard and came to take a look. In the end, he's been standing in front of the window like a block of wood for half an hour. I suspect that he has already entered a meditative state and won't listen to anything." Mo Jingshan calmly said, "Indeed, we shouldn't interfere in his matters." Because Nanheng sat here and drank a few more glasses, he was slightly drunk. His slender fingers rubbed his brows, calmly saying, "I owe Sir Nianj a favor in America. Otherwise, do you think I'd be willing to interfere in her and Old Qin's trivial matters?" Nanheng was not someone who liked to meddle in other people's business. If Sir Nianj had not chosen his birthday to bring a cake over, and if Nanheng had not been looking for trouble with Qin Siding these past few days, he would not have had the leisure to interfere. He was not interested in helping anyone. It was just that Qin Siding had been living too lonely these years. Seeing that he was living like a monk in meditation, he was not pleasing to the eye. He wanted to find some other stimulation for his peaceful life. Mo Jingshan calmly asked while driving, "Are you still at his place?" Nanheng. "Recently, he added quite a lot of good wine here. I drank a little and only finished it now. I'm too lazy to move around, so I'll stay here today. Anyway, we're two grown men. I won't let that pitiful Ling Xianna return and take advantage of Old Qin's situation to do something." "What's the matter? You're really coming." The wine that Qin Siding had recently added was naturally all from Mo Jingshan's hands. Mo Jingshan. Wait. 15 minutes later, Nanheng held a cigarette in his mouth, turning back to look at the man who had appeared in the villa. Mo Jingshan was dressed in black, appearing to be dyed in the night. He walked in through the door and glanced at Qin Siding, who was still standing by the window. Qin Siding put one hand in his trouser pocket and didn't intend to pay attention to the two of them. Even though Mo Jingshan suddenly came at such a late hour, he just coldly glanced at the door, withdrew his cold eyes, and didn't speak. "How long has he been standing there?" Mo Jingshan walked in. Nanheng turned to watch the tall man approach. His well-defined fingers brushed away the cigarette ash, raising his brows. "He's probably been standing there since he came back. He was already like this when I came." Speaking of which, Nanheng smiled mockingly at Mo Jingshan. "You're actually able to come so late. Could it be that Jean Wan was so drunk that she couldn't recognize you and directly kicked you off the bed?" Mo Jingshan coldly glanced at him. "You're very experienced? Often kicked by women?" Nanheng raised his brows, smiling as he held the cigarette in his mouth. He picked up the wine on the coffee table and poured a cup for him. Mo Jingshan did not receive the wine cup. His cold gaze shifted in Qin Siding's direction. From start to finish, Qin Siding had been coldly staring out the window. "You've chased away the impoverished young lady you brought back so quickly?" Mo Jingshan looked at his gloomy appearance and asked coolly. Nanheng sat on the sofa, smoking as he narrowed his eyes and smiled. He also glanced at Qin Siding. "You clearly have no interest in Ling Xianna at all, yet you insist on buying her. Keeping such a sticky candy by your side as the price, it's all because you don't want your Nianj to live too comfortably. TSK, what's the point? Injuring 1,000, injuring oneself 800. Oh no, it should be injuring 1,000, injuring oneself 10,000. Chapter 170. Mo Jingshan walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, lifted his eyelids, and looked out. Qin Sighting stood there and looked in the direction of the villa not far away. The villa was dark and without light. No one had returned, and the black carved door in front of the door had been quiet for a night. There was only a floor lamp on this side of the floor-to-ceiling window. Under the dim light, no one spoke, and there was a moment of silence. The whole world seemed to be quiet, except for a white cat jumping out of the high wall of the opposite villa, meowing softly in the darkness from time to time. Mo Jingshan put one hand in his trouser pocket, his calm, low, and cold voice particularly clear under the dim light. Back then, you disregarded your own safety to love her, and then hated her to death. Now that she has returned, you keep avoiding her. Tonight, you clearly want to continue acting like a stranger. What are you still standing here looking at? If she doesn't come back for a night, are you going to stand here and wait all night? Qin Sighting, who had been meditating for a long time, finally moved, but he only turned to glance at him. Who the F*** CK said I'm standing here to look at her? As though the oppressive peace of the night was finally broken, Qin Sighting's brows were full of coldness. Do you think I'm the type to stand here and wait until dawn for such a woman? Mo Jingshan coldly said, her villa has been empty here for a few years, and you've moved here for a few years. You've been looking at an empty villa for so long, and now that the person who left has finally come back, she probably still doesn't know that you live across from her. Don't you know how long you've been standing here every day and night? Qin Sighting. He abruptly turned to the sofa, picked up the cigarette that Nanheng had thrown on the coffee table, and lit it. After taking a few puffs to calm down, he coldly said, moving here was also a decision I made several years ago when I was ignorant and still immersed in the entanglement of love and hate. Now I don't have any feelings for her. I'm just used to living here and can't be bothered to change places. Nanheng sneered as he puffed out the smoke. Is it because you're young and ignorant, or is it because you've lived for more than 20 years and only had feelings for such a woman? Even now, those women chasing after you all think you're not interested in women. In the end, who knew that your pure young man's heart had long been crushed by a woman and hasn't been pieced back together until now? Qin Sighting was expressionless. The two of you came to my place in the middle of the night just to ridicule me for my stupid past? Nanheng smiled. I do have that intention, but I don't know why he came so late at night. I said he was kicked out of bed by Jin Wan, but he refused to admit it. Nanheng watched Mo Jingshan as he spoke. Mo Jingshan calmly said, I couldn't sleep, so I came to see how unhappy old Qin is. If he tells me, perhaps I'll be happy. Qin Sighting. Can't sleep? Qin Sighting sneered. After taking a few puffs, he put out the cigarette. You too can't sleep, so you came here to watch me? Nanheng was laughing with a cigarette in his mouth. Mo Jingshan only coldly raised his brows. Indeed, he could not sleep. She was not kicked out of bed, nor did they quarrel. It was his woman who wanted to go to T-City to study. She wanted to change her identity from Mrs. Mo to a business student at T University. Although she would only be studying for a few short months, it could be considered a temporary separation from him. This was clearly a decision she had made after the banquet that day. The little woman clearly dared to make this decision under the pretext of being drunk. Could he reject? He could, but he clearly could not. He could clearly feel that after Jin Wan's temperament changed several months ago, under the calm and mature surface, there was an indescribable vulnerability and sensitivity. She was extremely afraid of being separated by life and death. She was even more afraid of not being able to control her own life. She had more stubbornness in her bones, more things that she wanted to hold on to, but they were hidden very deeply. When Mo Jingshan returned, it was already close to dawn. The sky was still dark, but there were hints of white. He originally thought that Jin Wan was still asleep, but the little woman was tossing and turning on the bed. It was clear that she did not sleep well. It was only when he laid down by her side that she furrowed her brows and burrowed into his embrace, gradually calming down. Mo Jingshin stroked her hair. Headache. Jin-won closed her eyes and nodded in his embrace. She was half asleep and dazed. She did not speak. Mo Jingshin's hand that had landed on her hair turned to gently massage her forehead. She did not move, allowing him to soothe the pain in her head. The little woman wore soft pajamas, her long hair scattered on the pillow on the bed. Her body was fragrant, and she leaned softly in his embrace. Her eyes were closed the entire time. She did not ask where he had gone, and only instinctively snuggled into his embrace, unwilling to move away, even a single inch. Emon Wan's studio. The computer screen was filled with all sorts of messages that Xia Tian had sent her on MSN. Right now, Xia Tian could already walk normally with the help of a walking stick. She just needed to go through 3 months of rehabilitation. If she wanted to come to her studio to help, it would not be convenient for her to stay too far away. However, when Xia Tian studied with her in America, she studied at the University of Finance and Economics. She also specialized in financial analysis. Right now, the position of the finance manager in the studio was vacant. It just so happened that Xia Tian could come over to help her. This would save Ji-nuan a lot of effort. The two of them were chatting in full swing when the intercom on the office desk suddenly rang. Ji-nuan casually picked it up. Hello. CEO Ji, hello. There's a package for you here. The call came from the mailroom on the first floor of Jinlin building. Ji-nuan glanced at the caller ID and said, All right, I'll be down in a moment. After hanging up, Ji-nuan typed a few words on the keyboard. Are you afraid that you'll have too many things after leaving the hospital, so you packed up your things and sent them to the studio? Xia Tian replied, No, I don't have many things. When I go, I'll just casually bring a suitcase to my place. Ji-nuan raised her brows slightly. That was strange. Why would there suddenly be a package for her? In this year, the domestic e-commerce industry had just started. She didn't have the habit of buying things online, and she rarely sent things to others. Xiaoba or her secretary were in charge of the letters or phone faxes she received in her studio. Xiaoba didn't know what to do with Xiaoba. Why would there be a package directly sent to her? Jin-won directly went downstairs to the mailroom on the first floor. The person inside handed her a square box that was not very large. Jin-won saw that the box was wrapped tightly and could not tell what exactly was inside. Furthermore, there was only the address of the recipient and her name. There was no address or sender written on it.
Who sent it?
Jin-won kept an eye out and asked. I'm not sure. Earlier, when I was tidying up the pile of boxes by the door, I discovered it. Chapter 171. Jin-won took the package and entered the elevator. The moment she returned to the office, Feng Ling glanced at the box in her hands. What is it? I just received the package. I don't know what's inside, Jin-won said as she prepared to enter. However, Feng Ling's expression turned solemn. She immediately became wary and turned to enter the office with her. As they walked, she said, I'll open it for you. Stand further away. Jin-won faltered. She was about to say that it was fine, and that it was just a package. However, she saw that Feng Ling had already carried the box to the office table. Knowing how responsible and cautious Feng Ling was usually, she smiled and teased, All right, then go ahead and open it. Be careful. Don't let it be something like a bomb. As she spoke, Feng Ling had already opened the waterproof bag and opened the box. She lowered her eyes to see what was inside and paused. She then turned back to look at Jin-won. What is it? Jin-won walked over and lowered her head to see that there was actually a medium-sized doll in the box. The doll was dressed in a white wedding dress and was very beautiful and adorable. Why is it a doll? Who would send me something like this?
See.
Jin-won reached out to pick up the doll. However, the moment her hand touched the doll, a sharp pain spread from her palm. She softly cried out in pain as blood flowed down her palm and fingers, dripping onto the doll's wedding dress. Be careful. Foam Ling quickly pulled Jinwan's hand away and kicked the package onto the ground. Jinwan turned back and stared in shock at the doll that had instantly shattered into pieces. She ignored the pain in her palm and stared at the doll that appeared to be simply pieced together in the box. However, when it was placed in the box, it had already been dismembered. The floor was also littered with blades. The doll's wedding dress was dyed red by Jinwan's blood. The dismembered head and limbs, as well as the blood-stained wedding dress, were a ghastly sight. "Are you all right?" Foam Ling coldly stared at the doll that had turned from adorable to frightening. She immediately grabbed Jinwan's hand and saw that her fingers and palm had been slashed to varying degrees by the blades. "I'm fine." Jinwan shook her head. The pain in her palm was not too serious, but the blade had cut deep and caused more blood to flow. She then turned to look at the doll on the ground. Her eyebrows moved slightly as she fell into deep thought. Whose prank was this? Or did someone else have other intentions? After confirming that Jinwan was standing at a safe distance, she walked over, bent down, and untied the blood-stained wedding dress on the doll. Only then did she see the blades stabbed into the doll's body. There were also many blades hidden in the wedding dress. They were very small and very sharp. Jinwan stared at the blades and then at her hands thoughtfully. After checking, Foam Ling stood up and said, "The cuts on your hands are very deep. Go to the hospital to stop the bleeding and bandage them first." Jinwan nodded and turned to glance at the express delivery box. Foam Ling seemed to understand her and went over to tear off the receipt. As they walked out of the office, Xiaoba happened to pass by. Seeing Jinwan's hand, she immediately cried out, "Oh my god, Boss Nguyen, what's wrong with your hand? Why is there so much blood?" Jinwan indicated for Foam Ling to pass the receipt to Xiaoba. "Go to this delivery company and ask them to find out where this package came from. If they don't do it, call the police to complain." Xiaoba received it in a daze and then nodded. "All right, but Boss Nguyen, your hand. It's fine. It's just some blood. Don't make a fuss." Jinwan did not say more and headed out. "Let's go to Dr. Chin's hospital. It's not far from here," Foam Ling said as she pushed open the door. Jinwan was still thinking about why the doll was wearing a wedding dress and did not say more. When they got into the car, Jinwan saw Foam Ling's serious expression. After thinking for a moment, she said, "It's my fault for being careless. Besides, these are all superficial wounds. Don't tell Jingshen, in case he worries." Foam Ling was about to drive when she turned back to look at her. "It's my fault. I shouldn't have opened the box and seen a doll. Mr. Mo will find out about this sooner or later. There's no way to hide it. Let's go to the hospital first. We'll talk after Xiaoba finds the results." Jinwan lowered her eyes to look at her hand. Foam Ling did not say more and turned to drive. Hospital. Chin's sighting helped Jinwan apply medicine on her palm while saying mockingly, "Do you really think I'm an all-purpose doctor? I'm in the internal medicine department. Even an external wound has to be treated by me. How did you end up like this in the studio? How exactly did you injure yourself?" Foam Ling stood by Jinwan's side and did not speak. Earlier, when Jinwan saw Chin's sighting, she finally diverted some attention and paid special attention to his expression. He still had that sly smile on his face, as though nothing had happened in Zijingqing Club. "Aya, be gentler." Jinwan felt a piercing pain in her palm. She abruptly cried out softly, "Are you going to directly press the alcohol cotton into my wound? Can you see that the 2 wounds on my palm are very deep? Can't you be gentler?" Chin's sighting sneered. "Endure it." Jinwan. She abruptly raised her head to look at Foam Ling. Earlier, she had said that she would directly find a doctor from the trauma department to disinfect and bandage her wound. However, Foam Ling insisted on bringing her to Dr. Chin. It was as though aside from Dr. Chin, no one else was reliable. You don't need to look at Foam Ling. She was heavily injured during a mission in America and almost lost her little life. It was me who brought her back from the gates of hell. She is very stubborn. In this world, aside from me, no one else can be called a doctor in her eyes. Qin Siding spoke indifferently and then used the alcohol cotton to wipe Jin Wan's fingers. When Jin Wan once again clenched her teeth in pain, he coldly asked, "Does it hurt that much?" "When my hand was injured, I didn't feel much pain. Don't put salt in the alcohol. It hurts like hell," Jin Wan said as she retracted her hand. "Is it done?" "It's more or less fine. There's no need to bandage it. The injury on your palm is more serious. It needs to be bandaged. Your fingers are fine. You just need to apply some medicine to disinfect it." Qin Siding's voice was mild. "For the next few days, be careful not to touch water in case it gets infected." Jin Wan nodded. Qin Siding placed the rest of the alcohol cotton on the shelf by the side. He then turned to look at her. "Your hand is injured to this extent. Have you told your man?" "I'll tell him when I return tonight." Chapter 172. After Feng Ling left, Jin Wan turned to Qin Siding. "Aren't we not on the same side? Why did you suddenly send her away? Do you wish for more people to hear about your Ji family's matters?" Qin Siding glanced at her indifferently. He casually took out a medicine analysis report that was thicker than the previous one and handed it to her. Jin Wan was about to reach out to receive it when Qin Siding suddenly paused. He placed the analysis report by her side. "Forget it. It's better if you don't move your hand." Jin Wan lowered her head to look at the report before raising her eyes to look at him. "What's the result?" "It's about the same as your initial guess. This so-called healthcare medicine brought back from abroad has not been found to contain any toxic ingredients. It can be seen that the other party has been very careful. However, if these medicines are taken together, it will become a chronic poison that can cause kidney failure." Qin Siding's tone was cold. Jin Wan was silent for a moment. She had already expected this. Now that she heard the result, she was not surprised. "My father shouldn't have taken this medicine for too long. I've seen the medicine in his drawer. He only takes it occasionally when he thinks of it. Could it have already affected his body? That depends on your father's usual dosage. This is a drug formula that is very slow and hard to detect. If he doesn't take it for a long time, it will at most cause his body's resistance to weaken, and he will easily fall sick. As long as he stops taking the medicine, he will be fine after a while of rest and detoxification. However, if he takes it for too long, the medicine will be like a frog being boiled in warm water. It will unknowingly seep into his blood and into his bones, causing him to be unable to reverse the situation." Jin Wan stared at him, her expression cold and solemn. After a long while, she slowly and softly said, "Thank you. I've troubled you, Dr. Qin." Qin Siding smiled and glanced at the analysis report by her hand. "It's a good thing that you've already discovered this matter. It's not hard to see that the other party is an extremely meticulous person. If you want to expose this matter, you still have to put in some effort. Otherwise, it's easy to fall into the other party's trap and dig your own grave."
Jin Wan nodded and did not speak.
Qin Siding didn't bother with her anymore and let her sit by the side to wait for Feng Ling to return with the medicine. About 2 minutes later, Qin Siding sat at the desk in the consultation room and drank some water. He suddenly asked, "Is your stepmother's ex-husband the sickly man from the Sheng family who died early?" Jin Wan had investigated Shun Haru's matter, but she did not expect Qin Siding to know about it as well.
"What do you want to ask?"
Qin Siding glanced back at her. "Sheng Yihan is her son. Even if they severed their relationship because of the Ji family many years ago, your stepmother used to rely on the Sheng family. It's still unknown whether she and her son have really severed their relationship completely." "Sheng Yihan is her son," Sheng Yihan said with a smile. Jin Wan looked at him. "Do you mean that the medicine you gave my father might have something to do with Sheng Yihan?" Qin Siding smiled mildly. "It's not impossible, but Sheng Yihan is cunning and good at hiding. This person seems too calm and unfathomable. Your stepmother is a woman in her 50s after all. A woman like her who rarely shows her face outside is very suitable to live a stable life in the Ji family. If something happens to your father, the Ji family's power in her hands won't be of much use. Unless there's someone behind her." It went without saying that although Shun Haru was smart, she was not smart to the point where she could handle things so cautiously. Enchanting did not say more. His words clearly did not go overboard. When Feng Ling returned, Enchanting coincidentally had a specialist consultation to attend. After explaining a few words about Jin Wan's hand injury, he left. Only the two of them were left in the consultation room. Jin Wan was preparing to leave the hospital when her phone suddenly rang. "Hello, Boss Wan, I've checked. The package was sent from Los Angeles in America. I can only find the address of the package, but there's no contact person. There's no other information. There's no information about the sender at all. And there's nothing at all. I can't find anything at all." The delivery company said that many people don't write an address when sending things, only leaving their name and phone number. However, this package seems to have a problem. There's actually no name or phone number. They also find it strange. America? Why did she feel that she was closely related to many things in America recently? Yet, she did not know what was going on. Regardless of whether it was her previous life or this life, Jin Wan was certain that she did not suffer from amnesia. She remembered everything that had happened since she was young. She had only gone to school in Los Angeles a few years ago. Was there anything she didn't know? To send a doll in a wedding gown, and a dismembered doll at that, the motive was clear. However, since it was sent from America, it should have nothing to do with Ji Mengran. Although Shuyan had returned to America in the past few days, with Shuyan's personality, even if the proud and arrogant young lady of the Yin family was smart and had some tricks up her sleeves, she would not have done such a thing. If Shuyan was such a vicious and violent person, she would have displayed it in the country and would not have returned to America so easily. This kind of method did not seem like something Mo Jingshan's father would do. This method was clearly done by a woman. Who exactly was it? At night, Feng Ling sent Jin Wan back to the Yu Garden. Unexpectedly, Mo Jingshan returned at almost the same time as her. She had just alighted from the car when his car stopped outside the Yu Garden. When Jin Wan alighted from the car, she subconsciously placed her hands behind her back. She turned to look at the black ghost. Without waiting for Mo Jingshan to alight, she headed straight for the villa. Mo Jingshan was talking on the phone in the car. When he saw Jin Wan's suspicious behavior, he hung up the phone and alighted. He closed the door and walked over. In the end, Jin Wan was in too much of a rush. When she reached the villa, her hand was wrapped in gauze and could not open the door. When she felt Mo Jingshan approaching, her scalp immediately turned numb. "Did you do something shameful? You don't even dare to raise your head?" Mo Jingshan's voice rang from above Jin Wan's head. Jin Wan quickly took a step back, moving away from the man to the side. "It's nothing. I'm just a little tired today. Why did you get off work so early? Don't you have a business dinner tonight?" As Jin Wan spoke, she quietly leaned against the door. By the time her last word landed, Annie Chun had already heard the commotion and opened the door from inside. Chapter 173. Jin Wan was rooted to the spot. The sound of the handmade Italian shoes on the ground was steady and powerful, but in Jin Wan's ears, it carried an ominous signal. She had just adjusted her expression and was about to reveal a smile, as though nothing had happened when she felt a slightly cold finger on her shoulder. "Hand, stretch out," Mo Jingshan calmly said. Jin Wan stared at him, without moving. The man's expression gradually turned cold. After staring at her for a long time, he suddenly chuckled coldly. "How long do you think you can hide it?" Jin Wan sighed heavily in her heart. She really did not want to tell him that she had accidentally caused trouble because of her carelessness today. It was really too embarrassing. She subconsciously took a step back, wanting to use Auntie Chen's presence to enter first. "Come here." Mo Jingshan's voice was heavy. Jin Wan was helpless and could only walk over with her head lowered. Mo Jingshan lowered his eyes to watch her. She paused for a moment and then saw that Feng Ling was still outside the Yu Garden. She guessed that there was no way to continue hiding this matter and could only stretch out the two hands behind her back. Mo Jingshan lowered his eyes to look at her bandaged palms and slightly swollen fingers. He directly grabbed her wrist and strode into the villa. Andy Chen saw his cold expression and did not dare to approach to speak. Just like that, Jinwan was brought up the stairs and into the room. It's just a superficial wound. I didn't tell Feng Ling to tell you, because I didn't want you to worry. Besides, I've already gone to the hospital to deal with it. It'll be fine as long as it doesn't touch water for a few days. Don't get angry. Jinwan knew that Emo Jingshin was clearly in the calm before the storm. She could only not give up on any opportunity to ease his mood, and kept explaining. Emo Jingshin did not respond. He pushed open the bedroom door and brought her in. Go in. I'm in a bad mood right now. Don't make me repeat myself. Jinwan's thousands of words were stuck on the tip of her tongue. She could only enter the bedroom. The moment the door was closed, she turned back to see that Emo Jingshin's expression was indeed very unkind. Explain. He coldly spat out these two words. Let me say this first. Don't blame Feng Ling. She's very dutiful. It's all my fault. I told her not to tell you, Jinwan said helplessly. Emo Jingshin took off his coat and threw it to the side. His movements were not gentle as he tugged at his collar button, speaking to Jinwan in a heavy voice. Don't be in a hurry to cover up for others. Since you asked her to hide it from me, you should tell me the truth. How did your hand get hurt so badly after less than 10 hours in the studio? Jinwan had no choice but to truthfully tell him everything that happened today. When she saw the man's gaze turn sharper when he heard about the dismembered doll in the wedding dress, she quickly recounted how she was taken to the hospital by Feng Ling and went to Qin Sighting's place to treat her wounds. Her purpose was to let him know that Feng Ling was really responsible for her and that he shouldn't vent his anger on Feng Ling because of such a small matter. The source of the package, have you checked? Emo Jingshin's tone softened. However, rather than saying it softened, it was more accurate to say that there was an unexplainable danger hidden within. Feng Ling is so obedient to you right now. She even dared to hide such a thing from me. It seems like it's time to find a new person by your side. Don't. This matter really can't be blamed on her. She knew that no matter what, I would come back at night. You would find out about this sooner or later. I only asked her to hide it for a few hours. After all, you were in the company during the day. I didn't want you to be distracted, Jinwan explained. Seeing that Jinwan was busy protecting Feng Ling and considering whether he would be distracted at the company, yet she did not care much about her own safety, Emo Jingshin seemed to smile. However, Jinwan could not determine if he was smiling or sneering. She could only hear the slightest hint of a smile in his tone. However, it made her worry endlessly if Feng Ling would be punished because of this matter. Worry about yourself first. Emo Jingshin looked at her, his tone cold. Jinwan paused and could only say, that was an international package. We only managed to find out that it was sent from America. All of the sender's information was hidden. Where's the serial number? It's in my phone's photo album. I took a photo. Emo Jingshin took her cell phone, opened it, took a look, and sent the photo with the odd number to his cell phone. Go sit down first. Emo Jingshin glanced at her again. Seeing his expression, Jinwan felt that it was best not to offend him. She obediently sat down by the bed. Seeing that she was obedient, Emo Jingshin's expression finally softened. He closed the door and left. Half an hour later, Shin Mu returned Emo Jingshin's call. CEO, Emo, I've checked. This international package's serial number has indeed been hidden. The sender must have paid a large sum of money to the Los Angeles delivery company. Usually, when things are sent from America to the country, the American customs aren't particularly strict. Coupled with the fact that there's a human factor, it was successfully sent to the country. Since it's been hidden, it means that there's still a way to find out, Emo Jingshin said coldly. Yes, I've contacted the people in Los Angeles. After a special investigation, they only managed to find the sender's surname. What's the surname? Sue. Hearing this surname, Emo Jingshin's calm gaze abruptly turned cold under the light. Her hand was injured, but there were some benefits. For example, Qin Sighting had instructed her not to bend or move her hand for the next 2 days, and not to touch water for the next 5 days. Thus, when Jinwan was having dinner, Annie Chun would send the prepared food up. She would sit by the table, and Emo Jingshin would personally feed her. Open your mouth.
Ah.
Open your mouth. Seeing how badly injured her hand was, she kept winking and smiling as she ate, as though she was very proud of being personally fed by him. Mo Jingshan tossed the chopsticks onto the table and picked up the spoon to feed her a mouthful of soup. Jean Wan pursed her lips and gulped it down. She then looked at Mo Jingshan's serious appearance as he fed her. It was as though he was afraid of scalding her. When she drank the soup, he kept staring at her mouth. He had already blown on it, and it was not scalding at all, but he was still overly careful. Jean Wan smiled, almost laughing out loud. She sat by the table and placed her hands on her lap, like an obedient primary school student receiving Boss Mo's feeding. You're still smiling? You didn't place a bomb in the package and cripple your hand, did you? Mo Jingshan stuffed another mouthful of soup into her mouth. I just feel very happy being fed by you. With a husband to dote on me, who wouldn't be happy? Jean Wan was in a good mood. Chapter 174. He stuffed a mouthful of egg into Jean Wan's mouth. She chewed and mumbled. Such an experience is hard to come by.
How do you feel?
Not much. I feel like I have a daughter. Mo Jingshan picked up another small piece of vegetable and fed it to her without waiting for her to speak. If we have a daughter in the future, you'll most likely spoil her to the heavens. Mo Jingshan's handsome brows rose slightly. Why don't we have one now? Jean Wan took a sip of the soup he fed her and swallowed before saying, I'll consider it after I return from T-City. Speaking of T-City, Mo Jingshan calmly said, the T-University professor that your father introduced is indeed someone with a long history in the country. He has taught many business managers, but there are many students who are attracted by his fame. There are already 40 to 50 students in his class. Are you sure you can adapt to this kind of learning environment? Jean Wan did not know when he had investigated that professor. She raised her eyes. You even investigated a professor. How worried are you about me? T-City isn't close to High City. If I don't even understand the situation there, how can I let you go with ease? Mo Jingshan saw that she had eaten her fill and casually placed the cutlery down. He picked up a napkin and wiped the corner of her mouth. Then, does this mean you're agreeing? Do I have to wait a few days for that professor to start a new class at T-University? Jean Wan's expression was filled with anticipation. Mo Jingshan glanced at her. I can invite all the outstanding lecturers to High City to give you a month of tutoring. If 1 month isn't enough, then 2. It's the same even if you study at home. Jean Wan knew that Mo Jingshan would not easily agree to let her go to T-City. No matter how outstanding the lecturers are, it won't feel good if they only teach me. Based on my age, if I hadn't studied in America in my early years, I should have just started university. T-University is one of the top business universities in the country. It's better to study in such a place. That professor of yours will be teaching for at least 3 months. Are you sure you won't return to High City for 3 months? Mo Jingshan's tone was mild. It's only been 3 months. Just treat it as sending me to T-City to further my studies. Don't your company often have people who need to study abroad to supplement their knowledge? 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. What's more, wasn't long-distance relationships popular in recent years? The two of us haven't experienced the joys and sorrows of a long-distance relationship before we got married. This time, we can experience it. Jean Wan smiled with interest. Mo Jingshan sneered coldly. Who's in a long-distance relationship with you? Sweet, sour, bitter, and spicy? You think too much. Jean Wan. It's not romantic at all. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Mo Jingshan was expressionless. In my eyes, we're still newlyweds. There's no need to use a small separation to make us feel better. Jean Wan choked. She wanted to argue back, but Mo Jingshan did not plan to continue this topic. He signaled for her to stand up with his eyes. Get up first. You've just eaten, and it's not easy to digest. Walk around the room for a while. I'll go prepare water for you to bathe. After saying that, the man turned around and entered the bathroom. Jean Wan. She didn't know when it started, but Mo Jingshan was becoming more and more skilled at taking care of her. After the argument at night, no. It couldn't be considered an argument. At the very least, Mo Jingshan's attitude was ambiguous. He wasn't sure if he would let her go or not. Furthermore, he was always cold towards this matter. Jin Wan's hands were bandaged. When she sat in the bathtub, her clothes had already been removed. Mo Jingshan half supported and half carried her into the water. She had been too busy in the studio during the day, and in the afternoon, she had been frightened by the delivery. She had been too focused the entire day, and the moment she sat in the warm water, she couldn't control her eyelids and felt drowsy. Afterward, she didn't know why she fell asleep in the bathtub. She leaned against the side of the bathtub, but the water that splashed against her body made her unable to sleep well. She opened her eyes occasionally and saw the man's figure. The sense of security she felt when she was by Mo Jingshan's side caused her to close her eyes and not open them again. Mo Jingshan looked at her face that was flushed red from the hot water. It was white and rosy, clean and charming. His heart was indescribably soft, and his eyes softened. His lips curved slightly. Don't sleep. It's easy to catch a cold if you sleep in the water. Mo Jingshan pinched her cheeks. He did not plan on letting her fall asleep in the bathtub. Jin Wan furrowed her brows and pushed his hand away. She leaned her head against the outside of the bathtub, leaning against a shoulder. Mo Jingshan did not force her. He helped her wash her body, wrapped her in a towel, and carried her out of the bathtub. His long legs moved, and he walked out of the bathroom. Looking at the tired face of the woman in his arms, his brows furrowed slightly. You're so tired. Don't go to the studio tomorrow. Coincidentally, your hand also needs to rest at home for a few days. Be good and stay at home. Jin Wan rubbed against his chest, saying vaguely, No, the studio is currently lacking manpower. If I don't go, everyone will be even busier. You know the studio is lacking manpower, yet you still want to leave for T-City. That's different. If I really leave, Xia Tian will come and help me. Jin Wan rubbed her head against his chest again, saying softly and lazily, I really want to go. I didn't say that you can't go. Let your hand recover first. Mo Jingshan carried her to the bedside. Jin Wan did not open her eyes. Just like that, she snuggled in his embrace. Her voice was half asleep and half awake. I want to work hard. I want to work harder than before. Mo Jingshan's gaze deepened. He watched the little woman in his arms and placed her on the bed. As soon as she touched the bed, Jin Wan consciously found a comfortable position on the bed. She then raised her forearm to her nose and sniffed it. She said fawningly, Thank you, hubby, for bathing me. It makes me smell so good. In order to get him to agree, this little woman really thought of ways to coax him. Mo Jingshan snorted, throwing the blanket over her. Don't move your hand around. Put it down properly. Hurry and sleep. Jin Wan was really sleepy. She wrapped her arms around the blanket and fell asleep comfortably. The next day, when Jin Wan woke up, she realized that she had woken up late. Her originally packed schedule for the studio was now gone. After making a call, she found out that Mo Jingshan had transferred someone from his company over to help her organize the various affairs in the studio. After confirming that all the work she had arranged was not delayed, Jin Wan finally relaxed and laid back on the bed. This man, Mo Jingshan, usually did not say much, but he always did everything well. Everything regarding her was handled exceptionally well. Chapter 175. Since she was told to rest, she would rest. Jin Wan directly went to the hospital to fetch Xia Tian, who was about to be discharged. In the end, because she could not hold anything with her hands, Xia Tian rolled her eyes at her. What's the use of keeping you? Jin Wan had already found a new place for Xia Tian to stay in. After all, Xia Tian was purely here to help and did not want any benefits. Although this Xia family's young lady had left home, she did not lack money. The only thing Jin Wan could do was to help her arrange everything so that she would not have to run around too much during her recovery. On the way to Xia Tian's new place, Xia Tian could not stop scolding her. Look at you. How can you injure your hand so badly just to receive a package? Doesn't your Mo Jingshan's heart ache? Even if my heart aches, what can I do? I can only blame myself for being too careless. Jinwon remembered that Qin Sighting had said yesterday that the bandage would only last for a day. After that, she just had to apply medicine on her hand on time every day. Thus, as she slowly removed the bandage with some difficulty, she briefly explained to Xia Tian about the package she received yesterday. Xia Tian listened for a while. Initially, because there were outsiders in the taxi, she did not speak. After alighting from the car, Xia Tian asked the person helping her with her luggage to enter first. She looked at Jinwon from outside and asked, "This package is clearly a love rival trying to scare you. Who is so bold as to send this kind of thing to your studio? Isn't this blatant provocation?" As she spoke, Xia Tian turned around to look at Jinwon seriously. "Apart from that in Shuyan, who else do you know about your love rival?" Jinwon could not help but think for a moment when the word love rival was raised. Since it's a package from America, this matter should have nothing to do with Ji Mengran. As for America, Jinwon hesitated for a moment. Apart from in Shuyan, I really don't know who else. Xia Tian's expression was one of exasperation. Who else is eyeing your husband, this piece of meat? You actually don't know? Do you know if Mo Jingshan has any other women in the country or abroad? I'm not too sure. There are only some rumors, but I can't confirm whether it's true or not. Xia Tian rolled her eyes. You don't even know about such things. Wan, how much do you trust him? Mo Jingshan was a man that could only be chanced upon and not sought after. How many women were eyeing him? How many women wanted to sleep with him? You're not even on guard? But I trust him. Trust my ass. Now, your love rival has thrown a knife right in front of you. This time, it's a dismembered doll wearing a wedding dress and a blade. He's trying to scare and curse you. Who knew what would happen next time? You have to investigate this matter thoroughly. Mo Jingshan had been in America for so long. To him, and Shuyan was only a woman his father wanted to force onto him. Perhaps he didn't care about Shuyan, but did he not have any other women? Or other women who were eyeing Mo Jingshan covetously? Sending such a doll in a wedding dress, it is obvious that she has a deep grudge against your marriage. If this isn't the provocation of a love rival, what else can it be? All right. Hurry up and go in. You're giving me goosebumps. Xia Tian refused to go in and continued to speak outside the door. No matter how well Mo Jingshan treats you, he is still a grown man. Before you got married, he must have had his first love, right? I don't know. Xia Tian was about to be angered by her. Wan, I'm telling you, if you continue to be so careless, you won't even know which woman will rush to his bed in the future. Mo Jingshan is the Adonis of many unmarried girls in Haicheng and even in the country. He is now the CEO of the Mo Corporation and the only grandson of the Mo family. In the future, if he goes to America to inherit Shine, women will rush to him like carps crossing the river. If you don't guard against them, you won't be able to chase them away even if you hold a fly swatter in front of him. Jinwon, you've always had a grudge against this marriage, but that's in the past. Now that you want to be with Mo Jingshan, you have to fully understand his past. Otherwise, what will you do if something like this happens again? Your love rival has already sent such a thing to you, but you don't even know who the other party is. The enemy is in the dark, and you're in the light. You're at a disadvantage. Xia Tian tugged at her earnestly. Jinwon pulled Xia Tian into the residence and said, I've long known that there will be many women who like him. Not only in America, but in Haicheng, there are many rich young ladies who can't stand me and wish I would disappear as soon as possible. But those who dare to threaten you so openly must have a close relationship with him. I know that Mo Jingshan has always been very indulgent toward you. Speaking of which, is your sexual life harmonious? Xia Tian suddenly asked. Jinwon pursed her lips. Forget it. Although your hand is injured, your rosy cheeks clearly indicate that you've been moisturized in various ways. From the way I see it, Mo Jingshan is really attentive toward you. If it was any other woman who has thoughts about Mo Jingshan, they would most likely be jealous to the heavens and explode from anger. Serves you right. How dare you harbor such thoughts toward a married man? Heaven will punish you if you're cheap. Wan, you have to remember. Right now, Mo Jingshan is yours, but there are too many people who want to snatch away this piece of meat. You have to hold on to him tightly. Don't let him disappear. Jin Wan rolled her eyes. I'm still fine. Why are you complaining about it? I'm reminding you. Be careful that you don't even know when your meat is snatched away by a wolf. 3 days later, Jin Wan's hand wounds had healed. Except for the 2 deep wounds on her palms, which couldn't come into contact with water, she could now move her hands normally. However, the skin on her palms needed some time to recover. The professor at T University would be starting classes next week. Jin Wan had to return to settle Shen Heru's matter first. In her previous life, she was unable to prevent her father's organs from failing. In this life, she definitely could not let Shen Heru's evil scheme succeed. Jin Wan first gave Ji Hongwen a call, saying that she would return. In the evening, when she arrived at the Ji home, she saw Ji Mengran standing by the living room door angrily. Jin Wan met Ji Mengran's gaze. Jin Wan's expression was calm. Only Ji Mengran's face was filled with anger. She was so agitated that she abruptly stepped out to block Jin Wan's path.
Jin Wan.
You actually have the guts to return to the Ji home. What do you mean by this? Previously, you left me in that kind of place and almost caused me to lose half my life. You're so sinister and vicious, and now you're pretending to be a good person in front of Dad? You always say one thing to my face and another behind my back. How can you be so disgusting? Chapter 176. Sinister and Vicious.
Who are you talking about?
Compared to you, how am I worthy of those words? You bribed a psychiatrist to prescribe medicine that would cause your own sister to become mentally weak. If you could even do such a thing, who could be more sinister than you? Taking advantage of my unstable emotions, you encouraged me to divorce every day and even encouraged me to commit suicide to chase Mo Jingshan away. Who could be more vicious than you? Jin Wan mercilessly retorted. Because Ji Hongwen had already walked to Ji Mengran's back, his words were clear and cold, not giving in at all. As expected, after hearing these words, Ji Mengran's face turned pale. However, she immediately became bold and confident. You don't have any evidence. What right do you have to push all the blame onto me? How would I know what kind of medicine the doctor prescribed you? After all, you're the one who needs to see a psychiatrist. The one who's sick is you, not me. Who knows if there's something wrong with your brain, causing you to have delusions? Ji Mengran angrily said. Furthermore, you didn't commit suicide. When did I encourage you to commit suicide? Do you have evidence? Do you have witnesses? It's all your imagination. Don't try to frame me. Thinking back to her previous life, when she fell into the bathtub due to excessive blood loss and had no strength to get up, Jin Wan wanted to slap Ji Mengran's face. Jin Wan's gaze was cold and cold. If you don't want me to slap you, scram. A good dog doesn't block the door. Who are you scolding? Previously at the Mo family, I didn't fall out with you in front of everyone because of Dad. Right now, I'm not in the mood to bicker with you. Scram. Ji Mengran stood by the door, refusing to budge. You still want to hit me? This is the Ji family home. Without Mo Jingshan to support you, let's see if you dare to hit. Pa. Without hesitation, Jin Wan gave her a slap. Ji Mengran stiffened. She immediately reached out to grab Jin Wan's hair with an unwilling expression. Jin Wan dodged aside. If not for the injury on her hand, her slap would have been even heavier. Seeing that Ji Mengran was about to go crazy and fight with Jin Wan, Ji Hongwen, who had been listening for a long time, suddenly said coldly, Enough. Why are you making a scene in front of our house? Ji Mengran abruptly stiffened. She turned back and met Ji Hongwen's gaze. Her eyes were filled with panic. Dad, it's Jin Wan. Ji Hongwen didn't even look at her. He only looked at Jin Wan. Come in first. After entering the door, Ji Hongwen asked, What's going on? You and Mengran haven't seen eye to eye recently. What she did last time was indeed out of line, but is what you just said true? Dad, Jin Wan has wronged me. Don't listen to her nonsense. Ji Mengran frantically tried to explain. You saw how I looked when I came back that day. I was drenched in the rain for an entire night. I was cold and battered, and I almost died outside. She's obviously the one who's starting to hurt her own sister. Shut up. Ji Hongwen looked at her coldly and angrily. He couldn't stand her nonsense. Ji Mengran gritted her teeth and glared at Jin Wan. It was clear that she had been frightened outside that night. Jin Wan coldly glanced at her. You don't have to be so paranoid. I will indeed tell Dad everything you've done. You won't be able to defend yourself. I didn't do anything.
Don't slander me.
Jin Wan did not continue arguing with her. She calmly said, Dad, I came back today because I have something to tell you. We can talk about Mengran's matter later. Let's talk business first. Ji Hongwen furrowed his brows. Seeing Jin Wan's serious expression, he asked, What is it? Did something happen? Let's go to your study to talk. Jin Wan was about to head upstairs. Jin Wan, if there's anything you want to say, just say it here. Don't think of going behind my back to talk bad about me in front of Dad. I'll admit to everything I've done. You can't accuse me of anything I didn't do. Ji Mengran reached out to push Jin Wan. Right now, Jin Wan had no intention of taking Ji Mengran's matter seriously. She did not retreat after being pushed. Instead, she raised her hand to pull Ji Mengran's wrist away, throwing her harshly to the side. She turned to look at her. Do you think the entire world revolves around you? Do you think Dad and I have to talk about you when we're alone? Who do you think you are? Do you really think you're a dog with just a few plasters on your face? Shun Haru heard the commotion and walked out. Seeing Jin Wan's fierce expression, she walked over with a smile. Wan, why are you throwing such a big tantrum the moment you come back? A few days ago, Mengran's phone was smashed because of you, right? As an older sister, you're really too insensible. Now that you're Mrs. Mo, you're really capable. You dare to be unreasonable with your own younger sister, throwing a tantrum so easily. If the Ji family can't tolerate you, no one is begging you to come back. Why did you make such a ruckus the moment you came back? The Ji family is usually quiet, but the moment you entered, you caused such a ruckus. Jin Wan's gaze was cold and distant. She did not pay any attention to Shun Haru, who was like a clay bodhisattva crossing the river. She only calmly looked at Ji Mengran. Your weak and pitiful appearance can only fool others at home. Don't disgust others in front of me. Don't you know why your phone was smashed? You circled around half of Haicheng just to follow me. My bodyguard did her job well. She thought you had ulterior motives and only smashed your phone, but didn't punch you. That's already because you saw the word Ji in your name. You still have the cheek to make a ruckus at home? Jin Wan's words were spoken directly in front of Ji Hongwen and Shinharu. Ji Mengran instantly appeared as though she was facing a great enemy. Her eyes were filled with unconcealable panic. That day, I was only passing by. What right do you have to conclude that I was the one following you? It's clear that you don't like me and intentionally had your bodyguard threaten me. If that bodyguard of yours dared to hit me, if I don't sue her entire family and send them to jail, my surname won't be Ji. Jin Wan coldly smiled. Look at your face right now. You have a guilty conscience. Although your mouth is shouting loudly, your eyes have long betrayed you. Ji Hongwen did not speak. His brows were furrowed as he stared at his second daughter. Sensing her father's gaze, Ji Mengran finally restrained herself. That night, she was truly provoked by Jin Wan to the point where she wanted to kill her. Now that she saw Jin Wan, the hatred in her heart grew even stronger and did not lessen in the slightest. Yet, Jin Wan remained indifferent. Even the politeness she displayed on the surface was completely retracted. She was making it clear that she wanted to tear her apart. Dad, don't believe her. Ji Mengran lowered her voice. Chapter 177. The sound of the teacup shattering caused Ji Mengran to take a step back in fright. The boiling hot tea gradually dripped onto her slippers, and the shattered cup scattered on the ground. Ji Mengran raised her eyes in disbelief. You only listen to Jin Wan's words and won't listen to my explanation? Do I still need an explanation? Ji Hongwon's expression was cold. You're my biological daughter. Do you think I don't know your personality? Back then, you threw a tantrum at me because of Jin Wan's marriage to Mo Jingshan. From then on, I knew you had feelings for your brother-in-law. On account of the fact that you're my biological daughter, I gave you some face and didn't expose you. Now you're the one causing trouble. You can't blame anyone. Ji Mengran appeared as though she had heard a joke. Since you know what I'm thinking, you still gave all the things I like to Jin Wan. Is there anyone as biased as you? Ji Hongwon's expression was instantly enraged. Since young, whatever you liked or what Jin Wan liked, as long as you opened your mouth, she would unconditionally give it to you. Your two daughters have been spoiled by me. She is indeed arrogant outside and is often criticized by others, but she only treats you, her younger sister. Whatever you want, she will give it to you. What else do you want? Is it because you're used to snatching things from Jin Wan's hands? Now that she refuses to give her legal husband to you, are you going to become enemies with her? As he spoke, Ji Hongwon angrily pointed at the pale Ji Mengran. You still have the cheek to stand here and cause a ruckus. You unfilial daughter, kneel down. Me? Kneel down? Ji Mengran glared at him with reddened eyes. Kneel down. Ji Hongwon's face was filled with undeniable determination and anger. Seeing the terrible relationship between Ji Mengran and Jin Wan today, he was so angry that his heart, liver, and lungs were aching. Old Ji, calm down. Mengran is still a child. Why are you saying all this to her? Everyone has the right to like someone. She didn't do anything bad. It's normal for a girl to fight for a man she likes. Besides, she didn't do anything, did she? Shunharu saw that Ji Hongwon was truly enraged. Standing by the side, she hurriedly raised her hand and patted his chest twice. Ji Hongwon's expression was ugly as he ignored Shunharu. He continued to stare at Ji Mengran, who was gritting her teeth and refusing to kneel. I'm asking you to kneel. Are you deaf? Can't you hear me? I'm not kneeling. Why should I kneel? Ji Mengran yelled angrily. She turned around and ran upstairs. Seeing that Ji Hongwon was about to drag her down with a cold expression, Shunharu hurriedly pulled him back. Don't be so angry. Jin Wan is still here. The house was originally peaceful, but the moment she came back, she caused so much trouble. Don't push all the blame onto Mengran. Shut up. Ji Hongwon suddenly looked at her. What did you just say? Jin Wan Ji is my daughter. Why can't she return to this house? Shunharu was slightly unhappy that she was suddenly being vented. She removed her hand from his arm and spoke with an ugly expression. I saw that you kept blaming Mengran. My heart ached for the child, so I spoke up for her. But look at it now. In your eyes, aside from your daughter, Jin Wan, no one else can speak up, right? Ji Hongwon frowned. It was clear that he did not intend to give her any face. Shunharu held back her anger and did not speak. She raised her eyes to look at Jin Wan, only to see Jin Wan's cold and indifferent expression. She was so angry that her teeth were itching. This little wench. Previously, when she returned home, she was still somewhat restrained. Now, she did not even bother to restrain herself and immediately started a fight. This was not a festive occasion. She suddenly rushed back to the Ji family and started a fight. What exactly did she mean? Footsteps could be heard from upstairs. Ji Mengran quickly walked down the stairs with a suitcase in her hands. Jin Wan saw this scene and coldly raised her brows.
She did not speak.
Ji Hongwon narrowed his eyes in anger. You want to leave? Fine, if you dare to walk out of the house with a suitcase, don't ever come back. Scram. Our Ji family doesn't have a daughter like you. Ji Mengran's footsteps abruptly froze. However, she did not look at anyone as she dragged her suitcase down the stairs. She glanced at Jin Wan one last time before pulling open the door and walking out. This child, why is she leaving? Shunharu muttered. She then looked at Jin Wan and softly complained, how can there be such a sister? No matter how wrong Mengran is, at the very least, she has never done anything that goes against reason. Why can't you tolerate your own sister and have to force her to leave? Are you only satisfied when Mengran cuts off all ties with the family? Are you only happy when your family is destroyed? Will it kill you to speak less? Ji Hongwen turned to glare at her angrily. Shinharu was about to speak again when she suddenly heard Ji Nwan speak mildly. If I return to the Ji family, how can the Ji family be destroyed? On the contrary, Anishin, if you continue to stay in the Ji family, that might not be the case. Shinharu furrowed her brows and glared fiercely at Ji Nwan. Nwan, what do you mean by that? Ji Nwan revealed a very mild smile. When she heard the sound of a car passing by, she turned to leave and did not explain further. Ji Mengran drove a car out of the Ji family's garage, only to see Ji Nwan standing in the front yard. If it weren't for her father, Ji Mengran would really want to step on the accelerator and kill her.
No.
She had to endure it. She would not give up everything she wanted so easily. However, she could not allow Ji Nwan to lead her by the nose. There must be a way to control her. Ji Mengran pressed on the car horn and lowered the car window, shouting, "If you don't want to die, scram." It was as though Ji Nwan could see through her heart. She stood there without moving, coldly and indifferently glancing at her. Ji Mengran angrily got out of the car. She slammed the car door and walked toward her. Do you really think that with Dad backing you up, you can be so arrogant? Ji Nwan, let me tell you, where do you want to go? Ji Nwan appeared, as though she did not hear her words. She only smiled faintly and glanced at Ji Mengran's furious expression. Seeing Ji Nwan's expression, Ji Mengran was about to go crazy. She gritted her teeth and glared at her. The Ji family can't contain me, but there's definitely a place that can. Ji Nwan smiled. She was slightly taller than Ji Mengran. She leaned forward slightly, and Ji Mengran felt an indescribable pressure. She took a step back. Chapter 178. Ji Mengran's heart sank, and she took another step back. Her legs were so weak that she could barely stand. She could only lean against the car behind her to steady herself. Her face was pale, and she looked at Ji Nwan in disbelief and guilt at the fake smile on Ji Nwan's face. How did she know? How did he know about the friends she had made? How did she know what she was thinking? Could it be that Ji Nwan was possessed by some kind of demon or ghost? She even had the ability to predict things? No, that was impossible. Something must have gone wrong somewhere. Ji Nwan guessed that Ji Nwan had already investigated her and found out about the friends she had made before, so she followed the clues to the melon. That must be it. Even though she thought this way, Ji Mengran still stared at Ji Nwan in fear. She could not understand why Ji Nwan had become so unpredictable. Ji Mengran's entire body was extremely tense. Ji Nwan only looked at her with a smile that was not a smile. She did not have any other expression or movement. Ji Nwan reached out and patted her shoulder. Mengran, as a person, it's best to be quiet and not have too many thoughts. If you want to destroy someone, you must be careful not to destroy yourself first. Ji Mengran leaned against the car. Her expression was stiff like a fossil, and her entire body was about to slide off the car door. She raised her hand to push Ji Nwan's hand away, avoiding her touch. Originally, Ji Mengran was not afraid of her words at all. However, earlier in Ji Nwan's eyes, there seemed to be something unexplainable. It was a kind of hatred that had been hidden for many years and thousands of words. Ji Mengran could not understand it. The only thing she knew was fear. An indescribable coldness from Ji Nwan's gaze caused Ji Mengran to feel fear in her bones. The coldness that seeped into her bones was indescribable since things had already developed to this stage. Ji Nwan did not intend to keep Ji Mengran in suspense any longer. You're on your own. Ji Nwan's gaze swept past her face. Her lips curved into a smile that Ji Mengran wanted to personally tear apart. She elegantly and indifferently turned to return inside. Ji Mengran had been standing by the car door in a daze. She heard the door open and close. After confirming that Ji Nwan had entered, she slowly and carefully exhaled. She suddenly sniffed, picked up her new cell phone, and opened the videos of Jin-won that she had secretly taken before. In the videos, Jin-won was like a proud peacock, looking down on everyone, full of flaws, and it was easy for her to catch them. These videos were what she wanted to show Mo Jingshin, to let him see how spoiled Jin-won was in life. After watching the videos again, Jin-won's palms were covered with a layer of sweat. In just one night, Jin-won had become so uncontrollable. She was good at scheming. She appeared innocent, but in fact, she was terrifyingly black-bellied. She could even accurately grasp everything she had done and not done. She could figure out her thoughts so thoroughly. She did not even have a chance to retaliate. It was as though she had been led by the nose by Jin-won. No matter how much a person changed, it was impossible for her to become like this. In just one night, she was able to understand all of her goals. She was even able to predict and guess things that had yet to happen. Her heart and original plans were completely exposed. Jin-won's body. Was she hiding some secret? There must be a secret. Otherwise, it shouldn't be like this. Everything was too illogical. Everything was within Jin-won's control. This was too illogical. After Jin-won entered, the villa had already regained its peace due to Shun-Haru's pretense. Mengran has really left. Seeing that Jin-won had returned alone, Shun-Haru asked with a frown. Jin-won calmly glanced at her. Annie Shun, I really can't understand people like you. Back then, in order to stay in the Ji family safely, you cut off all ties with your own son just like that. You're so heartless, yet now you're so concerned about a stepdaughter.
Won, what are you saying?
Although my tone earlier was a little harsh, didn't I still hope for the two of you to live well together? Shun-Haru smiled as she tucked her hair behind her ears. She assumed the attitude of a good wife and mother. Let's not talk about the past. All these years, it's been you and Mengran in front of me. I know very well who's close and who's distant. Jin-won smiled, but her smile did not reach her eyes. She looked toward Ji Hongwon, whose expression was still ugly. Dad, let's talk. From the moment Jin-won entered the door, Ji Hongwon knew that this child definitely had something to say. He said, "Wait for me in the study." This child, she's still so secretive. I've already married into the Ji family for so many years. It's not like I'm an outsider. What can't she say in front of me? No matter how hard Shun-Haru tried to hold it in, her tone was still somewhat strange. Jin-won was about to head upstairs when she passed by Shun-Haru. Her footsteps seemed to subconsciously pause. Using a voice that only she could hear, she lowered her voice and said, "Andy Shun, I haven't settled the debt with Shun Yihan back then. Don't think that you can protect him by cutting off all ties with him. You've been hiding in the Ji family for so many years. You must be tired, right?" Shun-Haru's expression faltered. She abruptly turned to look at her. Jin-won smiled at her. "I advise you not to continue wearing a mask in the Ji family. It's so tiring." Finishing her words, Jin-won did not wait for Shun-Haru's expression and headed upstairs. She did not wait for long in the study before Ji Hongwon directly entered. "You suddenly came back in such a hurry. What do you want to say?" "Dad, Annie Shin has been married to you for many years. I know this. In the past, although I wasn't sensible and didn't treat her well at home, I didn't especially target her. You should know this very well." Jin-won slowly opened her mouth to speak. Ji Hongwon nodded. Some time ago, I took away a few of the so-called health supplements she bought for you from overseas and had them professionally analyzed." As Jin-won spoke, she took out a stack of papers from her bag and placed it on the table in the study. "These are the results of the analysis. Please take a look." Ji Hongwon walked to the table and put on his glasses. He then picked up the medical analysis report and carefully read through it. After reading through it, Ji Hongwon was not as angry as Jin-won thought he would be. He stood by the table and narrowed his eyes. After a moment of silence, he said, "Don't make this matter public. You're my daughter. I believe 100% in every word you say. However, this matter cannot be concluded so easily. I need to confirm it first before speaking." Jin-won was about to speak when she suddenly paused. She turned to look at the door behind her. Outside the door, there was a figure carefully standing there. As though afraid of being discovered, he quietly hid by the door, revealing only a small part of his shadow. If Jin-won was not standing so close to the door and was more sensitive, she would not have noticed him. She looked in the direction of the door before turning to look at Ji Hongwon. She slowly curved her lips at him. Chapter 179. Jin-won did not purposely lower her voice. She only smiled and said, "Dad, do you still remember that when I was young, I had an assignment that combined guilty conscience and walls have ears to form a sentence? At the time, I didn't know how to form it. Now, it seems like there's finally an answer to this question." The person outside clearly understood the meaning behind Jin-won's words. She hid outside the door, wanting to leave. However, knowing that she had already been discovered, she stood stiffly outside the door for a moment before abruptly pushing open the study door and entering. "Won, you can't say things like that. It's true that walls have ears, but having a guilty conscience has nothing to do with me. Earlier, I was preparing to return to my room to take something when I heard you and your dad talking in the study. Out of curiosity, I came over to listen in. In the end, I heard you framing me." Shun Haru had an aggrieved expression as she glanced at the cold and expressionless Ji Hongwon. "Old Ji, it's true that Won is your daughter, but the motives behind her words and actions are too obvious. First, she chased men ran away, and now, she's dealing with me." Shun Haru knew how to act aggrieved, and so did Jin-won. Jin-won turned to look at Ji Hongwon, a bitter smile on her lips. "Dad, you can choose not to believe me, but you can't not believe the analysis of the medicine. As your daughter, I can't possibly act like an outsider and tamper with your medicine. Your daughter hopes for you to live to a ripe old age, but that's not necessarily the case for some people." Shun Haru's eyelids twitched. Right now, Jin-won really knew how to use both soft and hard tactics. Her actions of taking a step back as though she was aggrieved were clearly forcing Ji Hongwon to take this matter seriously. To be able to block his escape routes so fiercely, he really couldn't underestimate her. "Dad, if you don't want to make a big deal out of this matter because of your past relationship with Annie Shin and want to settle it with her alone, I'll just say it here. I won't participate in how it should be settled." Jin-won once again took a step back. It sounded like she was taking a step back, but it was clear that she did not intend to turn the matter into a small one. "Won, your words aren't right. I clearly didn't do anything. Right now, you're making it sound as though your father is trying to protect me. Yes, he's your father, but he's also my husband. Who would use such methods to harm their own husband's life?" Jin-won's face darkened. Shun Haru saw that Jin-won was so insistent and had no choice but to grit her teeth. He had to endure it. If he didn't, who knew what Jin-won would do to catch him off guard? Ji Hongwon's expression was a bit dark. Just as Jin-won said, he didn't intend to make a big deal out of it whether it was true or not. The Ji family's business was deteriorating day by day. He was so busy that he did not have the time to care about the family's matters. Everything in the family had been handed over to Shun Haru. If things were really as Jin-won said, right now, for the sake of his face, he could not make a fuss like this. "Won, go back to your room and rest," Ji Hongwon suddenly said. He did not mention anything about the medicine. Jin-won pursed her lips and did not speak. She then smiled. "All right." After returning to her own bedroom, Jin-won entered. Her expression was still calm and indifferent. She paused for a moment and seemed to have understood her father's thoughts. She picked up her phone and casually flipped through it. Then he opened a hidden monitoring software in his phone and watched all the images taken by the surveillance camera. When he saw the scene he wanted, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he put his phone back into his pocket without batting an eyelid. At this moment in the study, Shun Haru could not guess what Ji Hongwon was thinking, but the oppressive atmosphere in the study made her feel a little diffident. She walked over to him, smiling as she said, "Old Ji, in the past, when I first married into the family, Won never gave me any good looks, but at the very least, she was able to remain silent and calm at home. Now, perhaps she thinks I'm too easy to bully, so Ji Hongwon abruptly raised his hand and gave her a harsh slap. He angrily said, "Don't think that just because I'm protecting you, I'll believe your nonsense. Back when your son cut off all ties with you and was chased out of the Ji family, I still haven't forgotten the look in his eyes. Has he completely cut off all ties with you? The two of you, mother and son, have long been eyeing the Ji family covetously, haven't you?" Shun Heru's body trembled. She stood stiffly for a long time before reaching out to pull his arm. "Old Ji, don't be fooled by Jin Wan's words. I really didn't do such a thing. You also know how hard it was for me to cut off all ties with Ihan back then. You also know that after so many years, as long as someone mentions his name, I can't control myself. As a mother, my heart has always been uncomfortable, but you can't use his matter to suspect me again and again. Yes, I admit that Ihan has returned to the Sheng family now. That matter back then was his fault, but that's all in the past. I swear that everything Ihan has done after returning to the Sheng family has nothing to do with me. Regardless of whether it's Sheng Ihan or the Sheng family, it no longer has anything to do with me." Ji Hongwon coldly smiled. "Is that so? I swear to the heavens and earth. I've stayed in the Ji family for so many years, wholeheartedly protecting this family for you." Shun Heru's eyes were red. Ji Hongwon chuckled. "What's with the medicine? Even if Nuan finds you an eyesore, without any evidence, she would definitely not say such things." "The analysis report of the medicine is right here. How can you explain it?" Shun Heru immediately refuted. "Her analysis report is fake." "Fake?" Ji Hongwon coldly stared at her. "What evidence can you bring out to prove that this report is fake? Isn't it just taking the medicine out for an examination? Then check it again. Check it again in front of all of us. I don't believe that she can do anything in front of all of us. She took this kind of analysis report to frame me. Who knows where she got the medicine from to make a fake report?" Ji Hongwon did not speak. His expression was still unhappy as he glanced at her. Shun Heru had an aggrieved expression. "Look, we still don't know the truth. Just because of a few words from Jin Wan, you no longer trust me. You don't even give me any face. Your daughter is really smart now. She knows how to drive a wedge between us husband and wife." Ji Hongwon was filled with anger. When he heard these words, his expression turned even uglier. Without a word, he abruptly walked out of the study. Seeing this, Shun Heru's eyes brightened. She turned and followed him out. "Old Ji, we have to check those medicine again. You have to help me clear my name. Otherwise, how can I continue living in this family in the future?" Ji Hongwon was about to head to his room with Shun Heru following behind. When the two of them passed by Jin Wan's bedroom, they saw that Jin Wan had already come out. Jin Wan stood by the door, playing with her phone in her fingers. Clearly, she had heard Shun Heru's words. Her eyes carried a hint of mockery, as though she had seen through her earlier. Chapter 180. In the hallway, Shun Heru did not look at Ji Hongwon's expression. She was only looking at the chilling smile on Jin Wan's face. Jin Wan's expression really caused Shun Heru's teeth to itch. She could no longer hold it in and said provocatively, "Nuan, didn't you insist earlier that there's a problem with my medicine? Why don't we take it for a new test and see who's the one lying?" Jin Wan calmly glanced at her and then smiled ambiguously at the unhappy Ji Hongwon. "Dad, you've been in the business world for so many years. Right now, it's clear that there's a problem with her attitude. Isn't this admitting that there's something fishy going on?" Shun Heru furrowed her brows at Jin Wan. She unhappily raised her voice and angrily said, "What problem can I have? You insist that there's poison in the medicine and even brought out some analysis report. Now that I'm saying that I want to take it for a new test, you're saying that I'm admitting that there's something fishy going on? Why are you saying everything? You're deliberately making things difficult for me, blocking my way with every word. I think you're the one with a problem." Shun Heru narrowed her eyes at her. "Look at you. You're so young, yet you're so good at lying. My matter has already been turned into this. Don't tell me that you're also trying to frame Meng Ran." Jean Wan smiled mildly and did not speak. Seeing that she did not speak, Shunheru glanced at her and observed Jean Wan's expression. After confirming that Jean Wan had nothing to say, she raised her brows with some satisfaction. Nuan, did you think that it was too easy to pull down Meng Ran's position in the Ji family, so you planned to make a move on me? Today, Meng Ran ran away from home just like that. In the blink of an eye, you're targeting me. Are you trying to swallow the Ji family whole? Your father is still alive. Isn't your appetite a little too big? Auntie Shen, there's no need for you to fan the flames. I've brought evidence back. No matter how you refute, it's useless. The evidence speaks for itself. Why don't we be more practical? You say I'm framing you, but where's the evidence? Jean Wan retorted, appearing as though she was innocently walking into Shunheru's trap. Shunheru chuckled. Evidence, I have it. I'm just afraid you'll cry when the time comes. After all, I'm already so old. I've thought things through more clearly. As long as the misunderstanding is resolved, it's fine as long as your father understands me. But if your malicious nature is exposed, who knows how Mo Jingshin and the Mo family will look at you in the future. With that, without waiting for Ji Hongwen to speak, and without looking at Jean Wan's eyes, she turned and walked quickly to the master bedroom. Seeing that Shunheru had entered, Ji Hongwen thoughtfully followed in to take a look. Jean Wan, on the other hand, unhurriedly followed behind. The moment she entered the master bedroom, she saw Shunheru nimbly opening the drawer by the bed and taking out a large pile of medicine. The medicines that Jean Wan thought were problematic were laid out one by one. She turned back to look at Ji Hongwen. Old Ji, these are the medicines I bought for you, right? Ji Hongwen nodded. Old Ji, this is the medicine I bought for you, right? Ji Hongwen, however, furrowed his brows. Seeing how she could not wait to get away from her crime, and how she placed all the medicine, it was as though she knew all along. This woman whom he had married for so many years, he had never seriously considered whether she had any other intentions. However, at this moment, there was no need for Jean Wan to say anything. He could already see that there were too many problems hidden within. Although he had taken these medicines almost every day, he had never taken them in front of her. She actually knew that these medicines were all in the drawer. Even after buying them for so long, she could still clearly distinguish each bottle. If one were to say that there was nothing fishy about this, no one would believe it. Seeing that Ji Hongwen's expression was cold and silent, Shunheru turned her face toward Jean Wan. Nuan, are you sure that these were the medicines you brought for a checkup? Jean Wan found it laughable. Annie Shen, why are you so anxious? My father's drawer has quite a lot of medicine. The medicine bottles all look the same. All sorts of blood pressure and sugar-lowering medicines are placed on top. You took them all out just like that. Those who don't know would think that you've been staring at the placement of these medicines every day to see if they have been taken. Of course, Shunheru would not lose her composure so quickly because of these words. Previously, when Jean Wan came back twice, she already felt that she was suspicious of something. Furthermore, after the reversal at the Mo family home, she could tell that Jean Wan was indeed different now. Shunheru's heart had always been filled with lingering fear. She was afraid that Jean Wan would discover something and she would be caught off guard, so she had long made preparations. I bought these medicines. When I was on vacation overseas, I passed by a pharmacy and carefully picked them out. Every single bottle was handled by me. Of course, I'm very clear about it. Shunheru's expression was calm and fearless. Jean Wan held back a smile as she gazed at the emerald bracelet on her wrist. Auntie Shun's life sure is comfortable. You said that you would go on a vacation and you could. The bracelet on your wrist is also very special. Normally, it's rare to see such a good quality. If I remember correctly, my father gave it to you many years ago, right? It's worth tens of millions. The more you wear it, the better it looks. I wonder if you've lent it to someone else to wear? Of course not. I've always treasured this bracelet and have never taken it off. Everything your father gave me, I've always treated it like a treasure by my side. How could I possibly lend it to someone else? Shunharu did not understand the meaning behind Jinwan's sudden change in topic. She looked at her with a guarded gaze, but her words were determined to protect the relationship between her and Ji Hongwen as an old married couple. Is that so? Jinwan heard her words and directly raised her phone, tapping on the screen. Instantly, a clear image appeared on the screen. In the video, the bedside table and its surroundings could be seen. The time of the video was also more than 20 days ago. A pair of hands could be seen quickly taking out all the medicine from the drawer. Boxes after boxes were replaced with other medicine that looked the same. Even the amount of medicine in each bottle was the same. Looking closely, the color of the medicine was the same, and there was no special smell. Even if the medicine was replaced, it would not be easy to find out. Although she could only see the movements of the pair of hands in the image, they were very white and wore an emerald bracelet. The moment she saw the image on Jinwan's phone, Shunharu's expression immediately froze. She abruptly returned to her senses and finally understood that Jinwan was actually trying to trick her. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.